welcome to the June 6th meeting of the City of Raleigh Design Review Commission. My name is Will Gaskins, and I am the chair of the commission. We'll go a little bit out of order here at first. Before we get into the QJ portion of this, or the quasi-judicial portion, let's go ahead and do the minutes first. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes, and would anyone like to make a motion to accept the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve as noted.
Thank you.
As submitted.
Any second?
I'll second that.
Awesome. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, minutes are approved. All right. Now I'll get into the quasi-judicial portion. The Design Review Commission is a public body appointed by the City Council that exercises both advisory and quasi-judicial functions. The Design Review Commission's responsibilities relate to zoning and other land use matters, as well as the visual quality and aesthetic character of the city. Today's agenda includes requests for design alternates from the city's Unified Development Ordinance. When hearing requests for design alternates, the commission sits as a quasi-judicial body and conducts as an evidentiary hearing on the request. That means it is like a court hearing. State law sets specific procedures and rules concerning how this commission must make its decisions. The commission's decisions are constrained by the standards in the city's ordinance and the facts presented at the hearing. The commission hears and considers evidence presented at the hearing and applies the standards set forth in state law and the city's ordinance. The commission must base its decisions upon competent material and substantial evidence presented at the hearing. If you will be speaking as a witness, please focus on the facts and standards, not personal preference or opinion. This meeting is open to the public and everyone is welcome to watch. However, participation in the evidentiary hearings is limited. Parties have rights to participate fully. Parties may present evidence, call witnesses, and make legal arguments. Witnesses may testify as to facts to which they are competent to testify, so long as those facts relate to the legal standards. In addition, no lay or non-expert witness testimony is limited. In addition, lay or non-expert witness testimony is limited to facts, not opinions. For certain topics, the commission needs to hear opinion testimony from expert witnesses. These topics include projections about impacts on property values and projections about impacts on traffic safety. Okay, so we're gonna go slightly out of order here and start with EA for 2024. And it's my understanding that they would like to request, the applicant would like to request a continuance. If the applicant can come forward.
Good afternoon, Chair Gaskins, Worth Mills with Longleaf Law Partners. We're continuing conversations with the Transportation Department on the nature of what this request will be. So we would respectfully request that the commission defer this hearing to July 10th, where we can provide more information at that time.
Okay, great. And for the commission's benefit, that July 10th meeting is our regular meeting date because of the Independence Day holiday. So that's a Wednesday. I'll follow up about that, but that sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
I understand this didn't quite make it on the list. Molly Stewart, Morningstar Law Group, on behalf of the applicant for DA 624, 201 Hillsborough. We are also requesting deferral today to the July 10th meeting.
Okay. Thank you. All right, we'll now get started with old business, DA 1, 2024, if the applicant will come forward. We will now open the evidentiary hearing for DA 1, 2024 on today's agenda. Casey, if you'll introduce the hearing, and before you start, please confirm, I'll swear you in. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
All right.
So I will quickly go over the slides that y'all saw at the last meeting as a refresher for everybody. It was continued from the May 2nd meeting. The property is zoned at is located at 914 Dowling Road at the southwest corner of Pool Road and Dowling Road. It's zoned commercial mixed use, 3 stories, conditional use in the Special Highway Overlay District. The applicant is proposing to construct a general building used for self-storage, and they're proposing that to be 3 stories tall. They are proposing 4 design alternates, all related to transparency. They are to reduce the ground story transparency on the north building facade, to reduce the ground story transparency on the east building facade, which is a change from the last meeting where they were requesting complete relief from that requirement, to reduce the second story transparency and the third story transparency on the east facade. Transparency is required for each side of the building facing a public street, and in this case, a minimum of 33% transparency is required on the ground story and 20% transparency is required on each upper story. And here are the 2 findings for transparency that must be satisfied in order to grant a design alternate. With that, I will hand it over to the applicant.
And while that's being pulled up, just to confirm for the record here, we have 7 commissioners, so there will be alternates voting as regular members. If you will state your name in relation to the case.
Yes, my name is Ashley Honeycutt Terrazas with Parker Poe, 301 Fayetteville Street. I'm the land use attorney for the case. And thank you for holding the hearing open to allow us to respond to the feedback that we got last time related to adding more visual interest to that Dowling Road facade particularly, and through architectural treatments and landscaping. We have revised the request, as Casey mentioned, not seeking as much relief as we were before because we've added more transparency to the design. Again, just like Casey said, refresher, this is the site, surrounding context, 2.8 acre site, zone CX3CU, across from a couple of banks, large lot residential and a mobile home park in the county. This slide is an overview of the current site plan, 3-story heated and cooled self-storage facility with a basement that fronts Old Pool Road, Dowling Road. Blue is the building, the green is the tree conservation area, the yellow is the outdoor amenity areas, and then as you can see, parking and loading are kept to really the side and the back of the building there. And I'll just, again, put these the findings, required findings up on the screen one more time, that we as the applicant have the burden to present competent material and substantial evidence to prove. And again, our 2 witnesses, Cleve Pate, expert in architecture and building design, and Ken Thompson, expert in landscape architecture and site design, will provide testimony about the changes and explain how the updates to the facade design and landscape plan, again, particularly along Dowling Road, which was the Commission's stated concern last time, better meet those required findings for the requested transparency design alternates. At this point, I'll call Cleve Pate back up. Mr. Pate is the architect for the project and was previously accepted as an expert in architecture and building design. Mr. Pate, you testified last time about your design goals for self-storage facility being to portray security to customers and how that's often at odds with transparency. You testified about how the windows and faux backlit hallways, which is often how self-storage facilities provide transparency, is inefficient for the interior design and is not needed for building occupants, as there are often none, and these walls will be lined with storage units which cannot have windows for security purposes. And all of that testimony still applies, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Just real fast, I do need to swear him back in.
Oh, again? Okay, sure.
You can swear him in, or you can confirm that he's still under oath from last time.
Can you confirm that you're still under oath from last time?
Yes, I do.
Awesome.
So based on the feedback that we heard from the commission and your original facade design on Dowling Road, you made a few changes to that facade design. And could you please explain those changes and how they have added visual interest for the passerby?
Yes, yes. Okay, so we heard the commission's concerns. So we've gone back and tried to make a few changes to maybe improve in pedestrian experience especially on the Dowling Road side. You may recall from the earlier meeting that the first floor of this building is partially below grade. That's one of the reasons that we did not incorporate some of the glass into the first floor at that time, but we have gone back and we have added glass on the first floor to the glass areas, which is the center section, and the end sections on that as much as we could get close to grade. We also expanded the glass. If you look at the elevations, you'll see that the center glass is larger width-wise than it was initially on that. So we've enlarged the glass literally in all areas on the building. There was some concern, and I will say on that, we went back and we took out or either reduced 9 or 10 storage units in order to get the glass and to get the corridors behind the glass on that. So one of the concerns was the building being so long. So we kind of went back and tried to do some proportional changes. We also added brick in the center section of the building around the glass to try to break that up. And then we made the piers wider with brick at the corner sections, which I think is a good improvement because it does shorten the building up just a little bit on that. The second and third stories, same thing in terms of glass. We widened the glass in the center section. And so we think that these changes kind of help with the pedestrian way, but also just changes the look of the building quite a bit in terms of more glass. As we talked about before, we've used a variety of materials on the building. We're not looking for any blank wall relief because we've got quite a few materials. We've got brick, we've got architectural block, we've got a high-end horizontal panel, we do have some EFS, and then we have the glass and the aluminum storefront on the building, which is changing colors and planes quite a bit as you go down the building. So we think we meet those requirements. With that, on this floor, on this elevation, we've got about 15.8% transparency on the second and third floors, and we've got about 10.3 on the first floor, which we didn't have any before. So this is just an illustration on the floor plans. The only changes that are different than what we had before is where we have added the glass, where we remove the storage units, put corridors behind the glass so you can see into the building. And these are the changes that you would see on that perimeter on the Dowling Road side. It's also the same change on the Pool Road side. Now this elevation, the commission really didn't have much comment on at the time, but based on what we did on Dowling, we went ahead and added more glass on the first floor on the pool elevation. Same situation there. In order to keep proportions, we kept the same size glass, just wrapped it on both corners on that.
Okay, thank you, Cleve. And I have no further questions for this witness, and I tender him to the commission if y'all have any questions.
Are there any questions from the commission?
I'd like to know how does the glazing and transparency benefit the occupants of the building as the UDO says the
Can you say it
intent
one
would
more
be?
time? I didn't
The
hear you.
UDO says that the intent would, part of the intent would be to benefit the occupants of the building. How does the glazing in this building benefit the occupants of the building?
I think we
as opposed
discussed
to
this a bit
pedestrians?
last time. Because this is self-storage, there aren't, because of this particular use, there aren't really occupants that are, benefiting, I guess, from transparency because they're self-storage units inside the building. And so really the transparency in this context is more for the folks on the outside.
Yeah, the floor plans for each floor in terms of square footage is somewhere around 33,000 square feet per floor. There probably will never be at any given time over, I don't know, 5 or 6 people in the building at best at one time. And they are basically kind of being pushed to their unit locations by the particular entry. The building will have codes to get into the building, so it's not a situation where general public can go into the building. So when people have their particular storage unit, they'll usually go in at an entry, which is a buttoned entry with a code entry, and go straight to their unit. So they won't really have access unless they're going to the office, which is, just where there'll be somebody on staff at all times.
On the plan, if you could jump back to those and show us, you had explained that there's a loss of a couple of units from the glass and then the corridors
Yes.
in front of the glass. Can you point to where those are?
Yes, I don't know how just, if you look there, look there, look there, look there. Now, the middle one was already there on the Pool Road side, so that is as was. But the other, and also right there, I'm sorry, those we had units that went to the exterior wall on the first floor. So we took the units out at those corner locations, the center location, and the upper right-hand corner you're looking at there in order to get the glass in.
Okay, and how does that translate to level 2 and level 3?
They're the same on level 2 and 3, except the glass is larger on level 2 and level 3 because on the first floor, we are partially below grade. So the glass is shorter in height, but on level 2, can you go back to that elevation on Dowling? Right there. If you're looking at those, that's the 3 levels. There's a basement level, which we don't see, of course. But this is on the first levels where we have the shorter glass, and on level 2 and level 3 is where we have full height storefront.
Okay.
On both of those levels.
And so back on the plan, it looks like plan south is actually the east facade. Is that correct? Yeah, and so can you point to those on level 2 and 3?
Yes.
And
On level
like
2,
how the glass interacts with those
Yeah.
units?
on level 2, we have the glass there, 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 there. Wait a minute, what's that? Somebody's. I don't know, we may be off the sheet on that. Okay. On that. Then on level 3, we've got glass. Somebody is not marking here for me. Yeah, okay. So those are the glasses we've got sections. We've got 3 sections on Dowling, and we've got 3 sections on Pool Road side, right there. Same thing on Dowling and Pool Road on level 3.
I got it. It just seems so the level 1 is impacted more than level 2 and 3.
Yes,
With the changes,
yeah,
yes.
because we had before, even on when we met with the commission last time, we still had the glass on levels 2 and 3.
Right.
Now,
it's the
the
same-
only place, we widened the glass on level 2 and 3 in the center section.
Right. So it's the same width glass from the first to the second to the third.
Yes.
It just looks different in plan.
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
Like
Yeah.
on the plans, it looks like
Yeah,
level
that-
2 and 3 are narrower than 1.
The plans are basically what we go through on this is when the plans are done, it's kind of an initial layout on that. And then when we get the elevation set and we get either approval or not, we go back. So the plans will be in final coordination with the approved elevations.
Okay, so those aren't accurate yet.
No, the elevations are accurate width-wise, height-wise.
It looks like there are doors on those spaces. Are those spaces that anyone can walk into, or are those locked spaces?
Which doors?
Where, it looks like there are doors where the windows are, where the glass is in those spaces?
Yes, those are
Can
basically.
anybody get to?
Those are just basically for maintenance and lighting on there.
So the building occupants can't even
Yeah,
see
will
the,
not be
the
any
glass.
patrons in there.
okay. And so, I guess maybe this is a question for staff. Is there something that I'm missing in the UDO that's an exception for storage units, for storage buildings? That it makes an exception that it doesn't have to cater to occupants, as the UDO says?
It's a permitted use in the district, and these are how these buildings are
permitted.
designed.
It is.
Yeah.
This is how this building's designed.
Well, yeah, I mean, even like, for example, the self-storage building on Capitol Boulevard also has the same design with the faux hallways and that nobody can access and the glass, and they meet the transparency requirements. So that's typically how it's met, but it's, yes, it's a permitted
Yeah,
use.
From a code standpoint, there's no exit issues there.
If
we-
that's the question.
Yeah, we deal with those on many buildings like this and fire marshal. So as far as exiting is concerned, in these particular service areas, it's not an issue. And also, I will point out too, is that, you know, we have the hallway behind the glass, but if there's beyond that, if there's a storage unit, these storage units do not go up all the way. So you actually see into the building from the glass. There's not
Okay.
much to see, but then you do see into the building.
Maybe along the lines of where Jason is going with this, on the second and third floor, is there a security reason why there would be a door to the corridor?
From these areas,
Yes.
we don't want anybody in there. We don't want anybody. But it's more of a safety issue because you do have, one thing the building is set up is that we try to keep a visual in the whole building because you have these long corridors. We don't really want a situation where somebody could kind of get into a nook in the building. So on our long corridors, we keep, you know, we have our exit lights, emergency lights, and fire extinguishers. And so in terms of these small corridors that are just behind the glass, we would like to keep patrons or anybody from going in there.
Is it safe to say those are there for design purposes?
Those are there for design purposes only, really.
Yeah.
There's no function.
To make
other-
to make the building look better from the
Yeah,
outside.
right.
Yeah.
And you do get light into the building
Yeah.
from these, but because the storage units don't go all the way up to the deck. Some of the framing does.
Okay, so the storage units don't go all the way to the ceiling height, so there
Not
is,
the wall, not the partitions.
okay, so the natural light is able to filter into the
Yes.
interior of the building. Is that helpful? Is that helpful clarity?
No, I still, as I'm reading it, it still doesn't have anything to do with the intent of the UDOs, that it lends visual interest to the street-facing facades for both the pedestrians and the building's occupants. And I don't see where these have any benefit to the building's occupants as the UDO describes, and I don't know of anything that precludes self-storage buildings from having to meet the same requirements that we require everybody else that has to meet this to follow.
They would just do faux windows, more faux windows to meet it. Like, if they were to just add more faux windows, it would meet the UDO requirements.
And I'm asking, how do faux windows meet the intent of adding visual interest to the occupant if they're not allowed to be in the space where the faux windows even are?
Well, the visual interest we're talking about, and I do apologize because I'm maybe not hearing everything you're saying there, but the visual interest is essentially based on the exterior appearance of the building. And really, it's a pedestrian appearance more than anything else. So that's what it's for. We really don't take into account much inside. The glass is there. There is a visual inside. You can see the glass from inside. You do get light inside the building from the glass. But the major reason for the transparency requirement on this
This particular use.
is just pedestrian, basically people outside driving by or walking down a sidewalk is pretty much what it is.
So
Do you have a
In your-
further question, or?
one more, that's the last one. In your professional opinion, if there were a corridor that ran around the perimeter of this building, would the occupants, as they're moving to their storage facilities, be able to enjoy views out of the building?
You talking about like an exterior corridor on the perimeter?
On the
That-
interior to the building, but on the outside
Yeah,
perimeter?
that is an option on some of these buildings that most storage is getting away from. It's extremely inefficient in terms of percentage of square footage use and storage use. So there's a lot of calculations that go in on this, and, I mean, it's about, they're looking at it like, what is their rentable storage space? And it's found that if an exterior corridor around the building greatly reduces the storage space in the building.
Does it also conflict with the design goals of a
It,
self-storage
it,
building?
it does, because one thing we talked about before is, especially on the lower levels, and a lot of these sites that, we use for storage buildings are sites that are a little bit off the path. This one, not so much, because there's like a shopping center, but a lot of them, so there is a security issue that we don't like having a lot of glass on the building, especially at lower levels. Because the buildings are usually so big that it'd be easy for people to come onto the site, move around the site. You really can't see them because you have kind of a controlled parking entry to the building. So the security aspect is a very big part of this whole thing. And that's one of the reasons we end up where we are today and why we're asking for the,
And do patrons typically enjoy privacy while they're putting their things away?
Yeah. And the other thing we've run into, and this is something that came up before the commission on some other buildings we've done, is that we actually had one building, just recently here, where people who lived in the neighborhood requested the glass be removed, which the commission approved. So we actually.
I think that's a completely different situation, though. That
Different
was across
situation.
from a residential neighborhood.
Yes,
This is
that
not
was
the
across, there's
case.
houses across the street.
Yep.
But there is some residential out here on Dowling Road. But I don't think, like you say, I think it's a different situation here because you're not looking directly into the building as those people were.
Thank you for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
I think where I might need some clarification from you. So the intent that is to lend visual interest to street-facing building facades for both the pedestrians and building occupants and minimize blank wall areas. And so the findings need to be that the approved alternate is consistent with that intent. And that the street-facing building facades utilize other architectural, artistic, or landscape treatments to create visual interest to offset that reduction in transparency. So that is something that we need to use our judgment on. And if you could go back to those elevations and maybe walk us through what you think is above and beyond in the architectural interest that design has created, or the landscape, or anything. Like, I need something to be able to justify that in my own mind.
Okay, we will get to the landscape here, and that's the next phase of this presentation. But as far as the architectural goes, I think what we've done here is meets those requirements, because I think there is a lot of visual interest on this building. The glass, with having the glass on the corners, we think is impactful on that. We've put quite a few very high-level materials on the building with the brick. The horizontal panels are an architectural panel. They're used now on many condos around Raleigh, for example. So they're looked at as an upper-level material on that. So we do have some ephes on the building, but we've kept it to a minimum on here. We have a split face, we have an architectural block, which we change colors on as we go across the building. So we think the building is got a fair amount of interest to it in terms for a storage building, especially when you turn the corner onto Pool Road, which is a lot of brick on that elevation. A lot of glass. That elevation basically, I think, meets probably, if not beyond, at least right up to the transparency requirements on the Pool Road elevation. So we think in terms of turning the corners with the glass corners, having large central glass, putting brick, widening the brick, which we've done at this point, we think is meets those requirements.
And the ephes is that kind of medium gray stipple pattern? The ephes on the elevation is the medium colored gray stipple pattern?
Yes, that's the sections that are right between the horizontal line sections you see.
Okay, thanks.
And in your expert opinion, does the visual interest that you've added to the building offset the 4.2% reduction
Oh,
in transparency?
I believe it does, yeah, I believe it does. Also, even on, just a note on the ephes, it's not so much apparent on these elevations because of the light and everything, but we actually have a varying color on those as it changes a little bit with some details on the building. So we think there's quite a bit of interest on that in terms of the elevations.
There are no more questions for Mr. Pate. I can call our next witness to testify about the landscape plan.
And if you will, state your name, address, relation to the case, and confirm that you're still under oath from the previous.
Yes, Ken Thompson, J. Davis Architects, 510 South Wilmington Street, landscape architect on the project.
And
I'm
confirm-
under oath, yes.
Thank you.
Acknowledge that.
So Mr. Thompson was previously accepted as an expert in landscape architecture and site design. And this is the landscape, shows the landscape plan we presented last time and the updated plan. Can you explain the updates that we've made to the landscape plan and the impact of the planned landscaping on the views and visual interests of the Dowling Road facade?
Certainly. The concerns we heard before on Dowling Street were the depth of the C2 street protective yard and the building's proximity to the street, the mature size of the planting material related to the proximity to the building, and the visual interest for the pedestrian. So here on this slide here, we'll start with the depth of the buffer. Our previous provided a continuous 15-foot following the right-of-way line, thinking that in general the buffer was to screen the proposed building from the street. The proposed change uses the entire width of the buffer uses the entire width for the buffer between the right-of-way line and the building. So we're at 30 feet here, 15 feet minimum in the middle, and 20 foot at the south end. And as a reminder, the NCDOT required that our street tree plantings be behind the right-of-way line. Next. On this one here, the next item was the size, particularly of the width of the mature plants. So we removed the cryptomeria, the white pine, the null oak, and the sugar hackberry. We've color-coded everything for you, so it's a little easy for you to see which plants are which. And we replaced everything with downy serviceberry, screenplay holly, broad eastern red cedar, columnar eastern red cedar, and northern bell sweet magnolia. We still do propose 2 white pines. They're at the ends of the buffer at the buildings, and that's to denote the beginning and end of the buffer at the building. And then concerning visual interest to the pedestrian, as noted before, the intent of the C2 protective yard is to screen the building from the street, but the alternate requires visual interest for the pedestrians. So we no longer are proposing the standard buffer with a repeating pattern. Instead, we have proposed shrub plantings only at the visual interesting parts of the building, and then we have proposed the required trees to go in these areas between those visual interests and the transparency. You can, unfortunately, since this includes the street trees as well, it's hard to see the planting along the building, but you can see here, and then there's some, those were the evergreens, and then there's some deciduous, and then we have all evergreens at the bottom. And we feel that that would provide visual interest for the pedestrian as they walk by the project.
I don't have any, thank you, Ken. I don't have any questions, additional questions for Mr. Thompson, if the commission has any questions for him.
Any questions from the commission? Okay, seeing none.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. I'll conclude. Members of the Design Review Commission, I'm going to quickly summarize the evidence in the record that we presented that you heard on each design alternate finding. And first I'm going to put the request, the updated request for relief up here. As Mr. Pate discussed, we've added glazing to both facades, and so the updated transparency relief requests are shown here. Again, the kind of in teal there, that's the request that we presented last time. So it was previously 7.5%, up that to 15.4, and 4.6 in that on the ground floor on Pool Road, or Old Pool Road. And then the eastern facade over there on Dowling, previously no transparency at all on the ground story, but we added that back into the design, again, to add visual interest to the building facade. And we upped the transparency, as Mr. Pate discussed, on the second and third floors as well, up the transparency on the Old Pool Road side so that it matches the ground story that we were providing on the Dowling side. So as to the first finding, the intent of the transparency requirements is to provide transparency and visual interest for both pedestrians and occupants, which our project provides. And I know we've had some discussion about this, but the objectives of the transparency requirements for occupants are, and I would say not as relevant in the self-storage context for this particular permitted use. It's a building that needs to, as Mr. Pate testified in the record, it's a building that needs to convey security. There are not many occupants to the building. This is not where the office is, where employees will be. These are just, storage units. And they will only come and go to drop off and retrieve their things from a secure facility where they would like privacy to do that, as Mr. Pate testified. It's not a facility that should have very much interaction with pedestrians, as customers come in cars and to the facility to drop off and retrieve stored items, but to the extent that there are pedestrians walking past the facility, as Mr. Pate testified, with the provided facade design, the materials, the color changes, and the glazing, which we amplified that design element in key locations to provide that visual interest as folks are walking by. And as Mr. Thompson testified, the site landscaping will provide visual interest as well. Again, as Mr. Pate testified, building must convey security to customers. Transparency impedes that, which is why the design team chose to provide visual interest in other ways. We increased the visual interest by adding transparency, red brick, updating the landscaping design to better complement the facade design, as Mr. Thompson testified. As to the second finding, we provided windows on all the corners in the center of the building that look into faux hallways, which are not accessed by anyone but employees for security purposes. On the eastern and northern facades, we've also utilized different materials and material changes on the northern and eastern facade, as Mr. Pate described. And finally, we plan to provide attractive trees and landscaping between the sidewalk and the building for that required protective yard, as well as an outdoor amenity area along the northern facade. And the windows, materials, and landscaping will provide visual interest for the secure storage facility. And to sum up, we've presented competent material and substantial evidence to meet the design alternate findings, and we submit that we've met our evidentiary burden on these design alternate requests. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who would like to provide testimony today? Okay, seeing none. Before we open or deliberate as a commission, are there any further questions from the commission for the applicant? Okay. Hearing no additional questions or presentation of relevant facts, the commission will now close the hearing and bring the matter to the table. As a reminder, this commission is tasked with deciding if, based on the evidence presented, this proposal meets the applicable standards. This decision cannot be based on the personal preference of commission members, rather it is based on standards and evidence. If, based on its deliberations, the commission requires additional evidence, the commission will reopen the hearing. All right. I'll let someone go first here, but Catherine, as our resident landscape architect, going to lean on you a little bit on the landscape, plan perspective.
The landscape plan.
Can you speak into your microphone?
Sorry. Yeah, the landscape plan has been updated and is, in my opinion, meeting the requirements of the standards.
Okay. And is it, improve, in your opinion?
Improved,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, from before.
Yeah, similar. So all of the trees seemed fairly close together. Do you think that those are going to remain healthy, being not that close together?
I think that they had stressed that a lot of them were columnar,
Okay.
so they should be sufficient.
Okay.
Jason?
Do you feel like the landscape design of this building kind of offsets the lack of concern for any building occupants and the requirements in the UDO?
Can you say that first part again?
The UDO requires that the transparency lend visual interest to the occupant as well.
Yes.
Do you feel like this landscape design in any way outweighs that to make that, that they've utilized this in a way that?
Yes, I mean, I think that it is meeting the intent again, and the occupants, I mean, the interior view out, there isn't really any, so it's definitely going to be, the landscape's going to be seen from the streets.
And the elevations they showed looked accurate
Yes,
compared to
They
the
did.
planting plan?
yes.
And just to, as we continue to deliberate here, I do think we should focus more on the second item here, just of, does the additional architectural landscape treatments offset essentially the lack of required transparency versus getting too into, building occupant and then trying to interpret the exact wording there too directly.
Yeah, I mean, personally, so from a building design perspective, going from really bad to bad doesn't offset the requirement in the UDO. I mean, it still doesn't meet the requirements for glazing. And I would argue that the building design is not meeting that intent, but when you layer in the landscape, if it really does hide that building to the extent it appeared in those renderings, that's what I'm focused on. And I mean, there's going to be certain times of the year when those trees don't have leaves on them, and the building's going to be more apparent than it is in.
But they do have they are providing strong vertical evergreen material as well.
So I would almost prefer to have the added landscape than do anything different to the building architecture. That's my own personal view on that.
Anyone else have any thoughts? Kyle?
It's not the most exciting building to look at, and the building type isn't. Also, it's functional. I don't want to get in the way of providing additional space for people to keep their things. I think there could be a potential opportunity to add additional detailing, especially in those brick piers, but I think the landscaping really does enough to offset the lackluster architecture of the storage facility.
Yeah, on that note, I'd say this commission has at times preferred to keep the architectural features of the building to a lesser degree at times as a means of having it blend in versus having features too. So, in terms of the intent here and how we've previously ruled.
I think I'm just cautious of setting a precedent based on the building's use, in some way saying that it's exempt from meeting the guidelines and exempt from meeting the rules because of its use, when there's no, I don't see an exception there to that, and setting that precedent could be dangerous. I mean, I don't know what prevents any other use from using the same argument.
Sure. Yeah, I think the question I'll put to you is, does the landscaping and architectural treatments offset the lack of meeting the code required transparency? enough to meet the intent here. And that's not directed at you, it's directed to the entire commission.
I think a potential pitfall of adding additional glazing is increasing the energy requirement of the building to maintain the heated and cooled storage facility, and I don't think it's worth additional energy usage. That's a good point.
Yeah, additional glazing, you're also, in this building type, you're not like looking into some room, you're looking at an opaque wall with a door on it. So it's kind of not really that transparent anyway. And these users, I mean, we all understand they're trying to store their stuff and leave. Nobody's hanging out there. And it sounds like there is some daylight coming in through the transom space above. So sure, they have the benefit of daylight. No one's in a storage facility for the view. Opinion.
Yeah, I don't know that.
And I do think that the variety of landscaping is providing additional architectural structure to the facade of the buildings.
Yeah, I mean, to me, honestly, I think that Kyle's note about, energy efficiency is really the most substantial element that is, convincing to me that there is another benefit there, because I can actually substantiate that, as opposed to being an opinion, something subjective. So, thank you. I'm satisfied.
I do appreciate the applicant for listening in the previous hearing and, being responsive to the concerns of the commission, and being, very succinct and offering visualizations that were helpful for the commission. We very much appreciate when that's the case. I will, given that we have 7 commission members, we can proceed to a motion at this time. I will offer, if you would like to continue instead of going to a vote today, we can do that. But if you'd like to proceed, okay, I'm seeing the affirmative there. So if someone would like to make a motion,
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve.
okay, second.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Seeing none, it passes. The commission's written decision will be adopted when the minutes of this meeting are adopted, and the written decision will be provided to the applicant and other parties with right to such notice following adoption of the decision. Thank you. Okay, we will now open the evidentiary hearing for item DA3 2024. Casey, if you will introduce this hearing.
Sure. So the subject property consists of multiple properties, including 1017, 1022, and 1030 South Saunders Street, and 1123 and 1127 Lake Wheeler Road. It's generally located at the intersection of Lake Wheeler, Hamel Drive, and South Saunders Street. The property is zoned commercial mixed use, 20 stories with the urban limited frontage, conditional use, and it is also in the transit overlay district. The applicant is proposing to construct a 20-story mixed-use building comprising residential, commercial uses, as well as structured parking. The applicant has applied for 7 design alternates. Those include relief from the requirement for vehicles to enter and exit parking areas in a forward motion, for a proposed driveway on Lake Wheeler Road, for relief from the side street build-to along Hamel Drive, to reduce the ground story transparency on the east building facade, which is facing South Saunders, a design alternate to reduce the driveway spacing on South Saunders Street, and 3 design alternates for driveway spacing on Lake Wheeler Road. So the requests related to the forward motion into and out of parking areas and the requirements for driveway spacing are in UDO section 8.3, and these provisions are intended to provide well-connected street networks, safe, efficient, and convenient access within and between developments, and to lessen traffic congestion. And there are 4 findings to be satisfied in order to grant design alternates related to these items. Next, we have Build To. Build To is the area where a certain amount of building facade is required to be located along a street. In the urban limited frontage, the side street Build To range is between 0 and 20 feet from the right-of-way line. And within that range, the building facade must comprise at least 25% of the width of the frontage. And here are the 3 findings that must be satisfied in order to grant a design alternate for Build To. And as we've already discussed, transparency is required for each side of a building facade facing a public street. For this proposed building, a minimum of 50% ground story transparency is required. This is a mixed-use building, so it has a higher transparency requirement. And again, your 2 findings for transparency. I'm happy to answer any initial questions. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you. If the applicant would come forward. The applicant will now present evidence and legal arguments in support of the request. As a reminder, any evidence and argument must focus on the applicable standards. And before you begin, if you will state your name, address, in relation to the case.
Yes, good afternoon. Again, Chair Gaskins, member of the commission, Worth Mills with Longleaf Law Partners. Address is 4509 Creedmoor Road, Suite 302, Raleigh, North Carolina 27612. I have 2 colleagues here as well, Michael Stevenson and David Boyette. Would you prefer that we go ahead and swear them in as witnesses?
Sure.
Okay.
Michael, if you'll state your name, address in relation to the case.
Michael Stevenson, 210 East Forest Drive, Raleigh. I'm the architect for the project.
And I'll swear you both in at the same time. So if you'll say your name, relation, and address, please.
David Boyette, 621 Hillsborough Street, Suite 500, civil engineer for the project.
Thank you. Do you both swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Seeing both in the affirmative, thank you.
So again, this project is the phase 2 of the weld. The applicant and design team all listed here, Mac Real Estate Group and SLI Capital are the applicants. And again, McAdams as our engineering firm, Perkins Eastman as our architectural firm, and Longleaf Law Partners handling legal. Again, the site is 3.67 acres, fronting along Lake Wheeler Road, Hamill Drive, and South Saunders Street. We are sandwiched between Dorothea Dix Park to our west and the Park City South development immediately east across South Saunders Street. The property is zoned CX-20-UL-CU pursuant to rezoning case Z6020 approved in October of 2021. The scope of this ASR is shaded in gray here, and the building that is the phase 2 building here is shaded in yellow. This will provide 525 apartments, 20,000 square feet of retail space, and 695 parking spaces. I will point out here there's a future phase location for an additional building in the future at the intersection of South Saunders and Hamill Drive. Here's an aerial from the south looking from the Hamill Drive and South Saunders Street intersection. You can see phase 1A and 1B of the weld on the left-hand side across Hamill Drive. Phase 2, what we're here for today, is in the middle, and the Rockway Apartments that are part of the Park City South development across South Saunders on the right-hand side. And again, there is that future space for additional development. Most of our building height is oriented towards South Saunders Street. And at the ground level, you can see here, and we have additional slides to present on this, but the applicant is creating a pedestrian plaza along Hamel Drive, as well as a terrace near the Hamel Drive and South Saunders intersection. The big takeaway from this project, as we go through these slides, you're going to see it is incredibly pedestrian focused, trying to create a spot not only for folks in Phase 2, but in Phases 1A, 1B, and folks at Park City South, a space to socialize and enjoy this part of downtown and create a nice access into Dorothea Dix Park. Here's a view from the north, essentially kind of the northeast corner of Dix Park. You can see the internal courtyard, and again, the building frontage along Lake Hamel. Here is the Hamel Drive building elevations, looking at it from the south. Here are the South Saunders Street elevations, one from the north, kind of if you were at the adjacent properties to the north. The other being from the south near the Hamel Drive intersection. One thing I will point out on the south elevation is the significant elevation drop as you approach South Saunders. Here is that South Saunders Street elevation. Again, significant elevation drop as you move from south to north towards downtown. And the Lake Wheeler Road elevation, again, some grade change along this road frontage as well. As Casey mentioned, we have a handful of design alternates to discuss. You can kind of break them up into 4 categories: build to, complete relief from the Hamel Drive build to requirements, transparency, partial relief from the ground floor transparency requirements on South Saunders Street, driveway spacing. We are asking for 2 design alternates today. Those are relief from driveway spacing to driveways that are adjacent to our site, both on South Saunders and Lake Wheeler Road. We had submitted in our application additional design alternates, but with the help of transportation staff, determined that those did not apply and that we fall within an exception for driveway spacing. So we will not be discussing those and are happy to formally withdraw those today as well. And then lastly, the reverse movement category, which would allow the applicant and allow loading vehicles to reverse into a loading dock located along Lake Wheeler Road. So we will start with the build to along Hamel Drive. As Casey went over, the build to range is 0 and 20. This being a side street, the building width requirement is only 25%, not 50%, but still we are requesting complete relief from that requirement today. I'm going to bring up Mr. Stevenson to discuss some of the building design considerations and the reasons for asking for a request along Hamel Drive.
Thank you, Worth. When we started this project, we very much thought about it as something that's going to complement Dix Park and the significance of the park, and we're creating a frontage on that park and kind of setting a precedent for this new district, which is going to be developing along the park edges. Also, that expanding the public realm was very important, and expanding the pedestrian spaces and pedestrian access. Second thing is we thought about were connections. So obviously, we're in a very important location in terms of connecting Dix Park, downtown, other developments. So thinking about those movements, those desire lines, and how do we get people walking through the site was something very important. So the urban design concept is very simple. It's how do we bring the park frontage into the site and expand that frontage so that all the buildings in this development have views to and from the park. So that was the idea of widening this space to create those views and open up and create this pedestrian space. So here's that public realm concept drawing. So you can see how the Phase 2 building, we've canted that edge further north, widened the plaza, allowing views to this future building to the east. The plaza is level, and that will be the primary focus for retail and food and beverage. Then that gives access to this terrace space, which makes about a 18-foot elevation change to Saunders Street. So that makes that connection from the park through our site down to Saunders and to the new developments to the east. The landscape, we think, is really going to be a significant part of this. Our landscape architect is really building on the character that we're trying to do in terms of urban design, creating a lot of really, we think, great spaces for people to occupy and be in. So we think that's going to be a very significant part of the design. These are just some precedent imagery of that they are showing us what we can do here. So just kind of walking around from west to east, this will be the view from Lake Wheeler, there where that new roundabout will be, looking into the site. And you can see how the storefront wraps from the Lake Wheeler frontage, wrapping around all the way into the interior of the site. We worked with transportation to create an environment that is pedestrian-focused and bicycle-focused, but accommodates cars in a controlled manner. So we thought a lot about drop-off, curbside parking, special events like food trucks and so forth. That was all integrated into our thinking about how we design this space. So walking around further to the east, you can see the plaza and the storefronts moving to the east. That opening there is public parking access, and then just to the right of that is the lobby, entrance lobby to the apartment building. And then just backing away gives you a view of the entire space and how the six-story element facing the plaza transitions to the tower over on Saunders. And then where the trees are, that's where you start to go down in the grade. And that terrace space, we think, is going to be a really fascinating space. The idea is to make that a handicap accessible path from Saunders up to the plaza. Again, that's about 18 feet elevation change. Also, there's an opportunity to have multi-level retail along that. So, Worth?
Thank you, Michael. And I will summarize what Mr. Stevenson just testified to and apply that to the Build 2 standards. So the first standard being that the approved design alternate is consistent with the intent of the Build 2 regulations. The UDO states that the intent of these Build 2 regulations is to both strengthen the street edge along the right-of-way and to establish a sense of enclosure. We think that we are, well, one, we are conventionally fulfilling those requirements on two other streets, Lake Wheeler and South Saunders, doing that through locating a building within the Build 2 range for the specified percentage that the UDO requires. But for Hamill Drive, we're doing it in a unconventional way, but yet a very effective way. And that is by defining the street edge with pedestrian amenities and pedestrian activation that takes both Park guests and Park City South guests and creates a sort of communal meeting space in the middle where folks can, again, enjoy retail options, enjoy restaurant options, and really use that as a place just outside of the park that can define the streetscape in a different way. The second standard is that the approved design alternate does not substantially negatively alter the character defining street wall or establish a build-to pattern that is not harmonious with the existing build-to character. And again, we think that the Hamill Drive Plaza helps to define the street. Again, not in a conventional way with the building, but again, with more pedestrian-focused meeting space. We are able to activate that ground floor public realm along Hamill Drive this way. And again, we do have space on this, within this kind of ASR scope, to construct another building that would sit closer to Hamill Drive at the Hamill and South Saunders intersection. That again helps to kind of further this emerging urban street wall that you'll get between Phase 1, Phase 2, and Park City South. The third standard, the change in the percentage of the building that occupies the build-to area or increased setback does not negatively impact pedestrian access, comfort, or safety. We think the plaza that Michael just went through does the exact opposite. It gets people from the park to South Saunders Street in an efficient yet kind of enjoyable way, both through the plaza and that multi-level terrace, creating good quality landscaping and pedestrian design so that folks have not only a way to get from one to the other, but places to stay at that plaza or at that terrace and enjoy that space there if they choose to do so. And so again, we think that the plaza and the terrace actually provide better access than what we could provide if we were to locate, just entire building mass within that 20-foot build-to area. Now we're going to shift over to the transparency request. Again, just to cover these very quickly, the requirement for a building in the CX, a mixed-use building in the CX district, is to have 50% ground floor transparency. I'll note that residential uses on the ground floor of a mixed-use building are excluded from this percentage. And within that percentage that is required, that square footage that is required, half of that must be within 3 feet and 8 feet of finished ground floor. Our request is for 33% ground floor transparency on that portion of the South Saunders Street facade that is not being used for residential uses. The other request is to locate 26% of the required transparency between 3 and 8 feet. And again, I will bring up Mr. Stevenson to discuss the architectural work that they've done to mitigate that deficiency in transparency.
Thank you. The frontage we're talking about is on the South Saunders Street facade. All the other facades meet and exceed the minimum transparency. That facade has about a 19-foot drop in grade as you move north. So what's interesting is that if you look at the facade and all the ground floor, we exceed 50%, but we had to subtract about 2/3 of the frontage, which is residential, leaving only the section outlined in red as the basis of our calculation. That is all service elements. That's a Duke Energy transformers, water meter room, generator, and the parking access drive. So that small sliver of space is what the calculation is based on, that we cannot really meet 50% given the utilitarian nature of those spaces. So, but everything else, if you look at the rest of the frontage, which is what a passerby or a pedestrian is going to experience, we do meet it. But that area in red, which is the basis of a calculation, we do not meet. And so this is a view looking south, and there will be street trees. There's a sidewalk and a landscape strip along that frontage. But again, in the forward corner, most of that is utilitarian type rooms, and have to have vehicular access to those. So we can't landscape that very densely but we'll bring it as far as we can. So that's what we're seeking, is the exception on that small part of the building.
Great. And just to summarize again, Mr. Stevenson's testimony to the standards. So the first standard for transparency, the approved design alternate is consistent with the intent of the transparency regulations. Again, as we've heard a lot already this afternoon, the intent is to lend visual interest to street-facing building facades and minimize blank wall areas. And again, when looking at the totality of the South Saunders building facade, again, as a passerby who is not well-versed in the UDO's transparency regulations, you would say that is a very transparent mixed-use building, one that is more transparent than not. And again, going into that second design alternate standard, utilizing architectural, artistic, or landscaped elements to create that visual interest, we were not required to provide that level of transparency for the residential units as is provided. So we think that we're going above and beyond on that residential piece in order to compensate for the lack of transparency in that small area, as Mr. Stevenson noted, is used for functional servicing of the building, like generators, like water meters, things that we have to have and we have to locate them somewhere. And we thought that this was the most appropriate place to do so. Now we'll transition over to driveway spacing. For both South Saunders and Lake Wheeler Road, those are both streets that are planned to be less than 80 feet wide. And so the UDO requires that any new driveways be spaced at least 200 feet from any other driveways on that side of the right-of-way. On the South Saunders Street request, we are requesting an 86-foot design alternate to construct a parking deck entrance that is 114 feet from an adjacent driveway north of the project. On Lake Wheeler Road, we are requesting a 121-foot design alternate to construct another parking deck entrance that is 79 feet from an adjacent driveway north of the project on Lake Wheeler Road. I'll now have Mr. Boyette come up and discuss the engineering considerations that went into the location of both driveways.
So the reason for the location of this driveway here is really about the grade. As you saw before, Saunders Falls as you're going north towards downtown. We were placing the entrance to the service and the parking garage as far down as we could to get the most head height out of the garage here. That allows us to get service vehicles into this entry, allows them to turn around in the building and then go back out of the garage without having to back out of the space. Pushing the driveway to the south would have eliminated the ability for us to get into that space with the trucks, to have the head height for them to turn around and get back out. So that's really the reason for the placement of that driveway as close to the existing driveway as it is. I'll flip to the next slide here just so you get a sense of what that is, a picture of the existing driveway, just so you get a sense of what's going on there. The second request that we're making is for our driveway along Lake Wheeler. This driveway is for passenger vehicles only. It is pushed as far to the north along Lake Wheeler as we could to get it as far away from the Lake Wheeler-Hamill Drive roundabout as possible. There are safety concerns with having vehicles coming in and out of that driveway if we pushed it closer to the intersection. So we wanted to get as far away from that intersection as possible. We also have an intersection to driveway spacing requirement that we're meeting by pushing it that far down. If we pushed it further away from the existing driveway, then we would have an ask for intersection to driveway spacing. So it's one or the other there. And then here, this is just a photo of that existing driveway as well, just so you get some character of what we're looking at there.
I got a quick question on that one. Can you go back a slide? Is that a right in, right out?
Sorry, I should have mentioned that. Yes, that will be a right in, right out. This image depicts the proposed Lake Wheeler road improvements by the city of Raleigh, which makes Lake Wheeler median divided. So that is right in, right out only.
And now to summarize that testimony as it relates to the design alternate standards. So the first standard being the alternate is consistent with the driveway spacing standards of sections 8.3.2, 8.3.4, and 8.3.5. The intent there is to provide safe and efficient vehicular, bicycle, and pedestrian traffic to and from the site. As David mentioned, on South Saunders Street, locating the driveway where we did allows us not only to get folks who are going into the structured parking deck in and out, it also allows for service vehicles to enter, gives them space to do a complete turnaround, and then exit the building in a forward fashion, which is, again, the safest possible route there. As it relates to the Lake Wheeler request, again, with the amount of space that we have on Lake Wheeler Road, we've located that parking deck as far away from the intersection of Hamel Drive as we could. I'll also note, too, the nature of the two driveways that we're requesting relief from on South Saunders. It's not a very deep driveway. You may have 6 or 7 cars in there at one time, and you don't see a lot of movement out of that. On the Lake Wheeler Road driveway, that is serving a church. So aside from Wednesdays and Sundays, you're not going to have many people entering or exiting that driveway either. Standard 2, the approved design alternate does not increase congestion or compromise safety. For both of these driveways, we are locating them as far away from intersections with Hamel Drive as possible, which is quality planning and building design there to make sure that we are not increasing the potential for incidents at those intersections. And again, those adjacent driveways will not see nearly the volume as those intersections would. 3, the approved design alternate does not conflict with an approved or built roadway construction project adjacent to or in the vicinity of the site. There are no roadway projects on South Saunders. There is the Lake Wheeler Road Improvement Project, but again, that project shows a median divided 2-lane street, requiring us to make right-in, right-out movements from that structured parking entrance, and our building design, structured parking design, takes that into account and is consistent with those improvements. The fourth standard is that the alternate is deemed reasonable due to one or more of the following. For the Lake Wheeler Road request, I will point you to subsection A. Given the existing physical environment, compliance is not physically feasible. As David mentioned, we don't have that much frontage on Lake Wheeler, and we are really working between the lesser of two evils, locating that driveway further from the church's driveway to the north, or locating that driveway further from the Hamel Drive intersection. Again, as we showed earlier, that Hamel Drive intersection is probably going to have as much pedestrian activation as anywhere on the site. And so by keeping it away from the plaza, keeping it away from the traffic circle, we think that that is, again, the lesser of two evils there. With regard to the South Saunders Street request, I would point you to subsection C. Compliance is not compatible with adjacent uses. One thing that I did want to cover as well, We do have some areas on South Saunders Street that are designed for drop-off areas. We also have a crosswalk that leads from our site over to Park City South. And so we don't want to locate this parking structure driveway close to areas where you're going to have regular drop-offs and pedestrians making that crossing of South Saunders to and from Park City South. Now I will let David talk to you about the reverse movement request. This is our last request. Sorry, Catherine.
Sorry, I was just going to ask you before you move on to that one, just to confirm that the two that you're taking off for the record are I have them listed as number 5 and 7 in the way they come in order of the request, but can you just confirm that for the record, please?
Yeah, let me pull up the staff report just so I can. 5 and 7 were the.
Yeah, 5 was to reduce the minimum to 22 feet between two driveways on Lake Wheeler, and 7 was to reduce between a driveway on Lake Wheeler and an existing driveway to 102 feet.
That is correct. So we can officially withdraw requests 5 and 7 from our application and just focus on those that were discussed earlier. Last request that we'll discuss is our relief to allow for a reverse movement by a loading truck into a separate loading dock onto Lake Wheeler Road. And again, I'll have Mr. Boyack come up and discuss the rationale for this movement.
So we have a separate loading service driveway along Lake Wheeler adjacent to the vehicular driveway. We're asking for the reverse movement for the service truck to be able to pull forward beyond that driveway and then back into that space. The main reason for this is the design team studied what it would take for a vehicle to be able to enter in on this driveway, circulate around through, and come back out in a forward movement. What that did was it eliminated a large bit of retail space that I've circled sort of here in green in order to get that movement to work. One of the, I guess, the principal guiding things that we were asked to do by staff at the beginning of this project was to provide as much street-facing retail along Lake Wheeler to connect the project to Dix Park to create the strong street edge there. In our opinion, losing that retail space on the Lake Wheeler side, that's just not it's something that the project really needs, and it's something that the city staff asked us to preserve. So we did study what it would take to eliminate this reverse movement, but came to the conclusion that losing the retail or having the retail was higher value there than making this ask for the reverse movement. So that was the reason for why we're out making the ask.
Can you talk about that?
Oh, yeah, sorry. So this is just a depiction of the Lake Wheeler Road project stitched in with our site to show that we are considering, what the city has planned here. We do have the median divided section here. Both movements out of those driveways will be right in, right out. No left turns because of the median there.
And lastly, to take that testimony and apply it to the standards. First of all, I should note, we are offering 3 conditions of approval for the reverse movement design alternate. The first being to provide a visual indicator on both sides of the reverse movement driveway, be it sidewalk material, sidewalk color, etc., to alert pedestrians to the reverse movement. Number 2, we would require that an employee of the building will supervise the reverse movements into the driveway. And 3, provide a turning template in a form similar to what Mr. Boyette just had on the screen. So provide a turning template for the reverse movement to demonstrate how it operates, subject to the Transportation Department's approval. These are the same conditions of approval for the reverse movement request made for Phase 1 of the weld on Hamel Drive. That was case DA 13-2022. In that case, Transportation had not yet approved the turning template by the time that the case had gotten to this commission. To be honest, I'm not even sure they had a turning template at that point during the commission hearing. But that would apply as well to Phase 2. We're continuing to have conversations with Transportation on the exact specifications of this template, how these trucks will maneuver into the loading dock, and any final approval on this request would have to first pass muster with the Transportation Department. So now turning to the testimony and relating it back to the standards. Again, the first standard, the approved design alternate, is consistent with the driveway spacing standards. Again, that intent is to provide safe, efficient vehicular, bicycle, and pedestrian access to and from the site. We chose to locate the reverse movement request on Lake Wheeler because South Saunders Street is a main thoroughfare used by folks to get from downtown towards our site, and Hamel Drive is designed to accommodate as many pedestrians as possible. So that really leaves us with Lake Wheeler as the kind of most viable option to locate this reverse movement. I'll note as well that the Lake Wheeler Road Improvement Project does have that median separation, cars going right in and right out. So any cars that are exiting the parking deck entrance that is also on Lake Wheeler would not have really any interference with the loading vehicles that are either backing in or exiting that site. So the approved design alternate would not increase congestion or compromise safety. Third, as just shown and discussed by Mr. Boyette, the streetscape and our driveway entrances and movements contemplate the Lake Wheeler Road Improvement Project, so we are consistent with standard number 3. And then finally, the fourth standard, the design alternate is deemed reasonable due to one or more of the following. And again, I will point you to subsection A here. Given the existing physical environment, compliance is not physically feasible. Given the constraints of the building, as Mr. Boyette testified to, the importance of having that retail space opposite Dix Park, and the lack of frontage that we have along Lake Wheeler Road, the project is not able to create enough space for a turnaround motion within that building footprint. I'll note that where we were able to on South Saunders, we have incorporated the room for that loading truck turnaround to get in and out in a forward motion for that entrance. That concludes the presentation from the applicant. Appreciate your patience as we work through all of those materials. Happy to answer any questions that you all may have. Thank you.
Great. I think there will be questions. Let's hold on to them for now. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak this evening? Okay, seeing none. Casey, there's transportation staff here, correct?
Yes, we do have a representative from our transportation team here to field any questions or provide feedback that you might need.
Okay. Can you come to the, thank you. Good evening. If you could just state your name and role with the city.
Certainly. Name is Mensa Webb, Senior Plan Reviewer in Transportation.
I need to swear him in as well, correct, Catherine? Okay. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Great, thank you. Does transportation staff have any existing concerns? Did they have concerns with regards to the requests of this?
And so we've had several discussions over a course of maybe a couple of months this past spring regarding some of the concerns that we did have regarding this development and the phases it's been that has gone through. We've discussed access to their site, discussed in terms of like driveway spacing. I think transportation does not have a large concern, given that there's a ride-in, ride-out, or a one-way nature at a lot of these driveways. We did talk through that. Looking at access on Saunders, the adjacent driveway, we talked through that. We can see right now it's not really being utilized that often, so we're not overly concerned about the potential for conflicts there, but did support the applicant's need to have the design alternate. But transportation, we're comfortable with the access that's being proposed for this particular site.
Is there anything further that staff you recommended to the applicant in terms of their design or request here to increase the safety of the design?
At this point, there's nothing further. Again, we've had discussions over the last couple of months. They talked about the activating Hamel, the pedestrian nature of that, the bicycle nature of that, also incorporating vehicles. There was some concerns initially with parking. We'd worked those concerns out. They've done a really, really diligent job of looking at Hamel Drive again. They've made significant updates and upgrades to that based on transportation's comments. In terms of Lake Wheeler Road, there were some concerns there. There's an ongoing city project, a CIP project being planned for the Lake Wheeler Improvement Project that is a divided section. So as the reviewer, I have less concern about some of the conflicts that may be there if you're looking for a full movement driveways. We're not having that because of the median section. So ultimately, no, I have no issues or concerns about access into the site.
Okay. And then speaking of the road project, is that's currently funded and slated for construction?
It is currently going through the process, the design process. I believe at one point in time it did have a certain level of steam. Right now we've had some turnover, some transition with the engineering services department. I know at one point in time we're having meetings, maybe quarterly, if not monthly, update meetings on that. So currently engineering services is still getting that project going, but it will be online.
Okay. Is that project funded through the current transportation bond?
I am not certain on that.
Okay. I'm just asking from a
Yeah,
timing
I'm
perspective
not
of how
certain.
quickly that's proceeding to the next. Is it possible that this project, assuming maximum speed, could be implemented before that roadway construction project starts?
Could you repeat the question? I can hear you.
Is it possible that this, if this project were to proceed forward into construction, that there would be any time where there would be overlap where the existing road configuration is in place before the construction of the Lake Wheeler project?
There is, I guess there's always the possibility of that. We have thought about that within development and review and engineering services. The project manager for that particular project did have, I believe, monthly coordination meetings, looking to get these schedules synced up, making sure we're communicating, discussing all of the potential, if there's going to be any issues out there, but how to coordinate, how to essentially bring all that into conjunction together. So at this present time, that could be a possibility, but I'm not certain. You may ask a question about the budget. I'm not certain what that timeline is, but ultimately there is awareness there, and we are having discussions.
Okay. Yeah. No, part of the reason I ask is because most all of the site plans show the future configuration. Sure. There are other questions from the commission?
That's on Hamel Drive where they've got the arrival court. Do you have any concerns about safety with that? Because that's part of what pushes the building back.
Certainly.
off of-
And at one point in time, there were concerns. Again, I think their team has done a really good job of taking into consideration the input from transportation subject matter experts in terms of what would be a safer condition for that arrival court. We've had some good back and forths on that particular element. At this particular point, I'm not concerned about it as a transportation reviewer. We have a raised intersection. They've made changes. They've actually made sure that we have incorporated bike lanes or behind the curb bike lanes along with the sidewalks. It's activated. The arrival court is delineated pretty well so pedestrians can go around or they can go through. And then additionally, there is, I think they changed the configuration of the actual road section, so vehicles should be traveling at slower speeds. So, no, I don't have any concerns about safety with the arrival court.
Regarding the truck reverse template, it appeared that the curves were extending over the median. Does transportation have any concerns about that?
Yeah, we do have concerns about that. I think ultimately what engineering service will have to do is consider that turning template and maybe reconfigure a portion of that median to account for that. What may happen there is maybe a narrowing of the median for a particular section there. But in looking at that, I think that's something that we can work with.
Okay. Great.
And then to your knowledge as far as the future cross-section on Wake Wheeler, there's a proposed multi-use path on the other side of the street, correct? My question is getting to so there's sidewalk proposed along this frontage, but
Certainly.
the other side of the street would be a larger sidewalk.
Right. And I think also a part of that challenge is how will the land north of the wheel develop once that comes online for development. From my understanding, yes, there should be a multi-use path on the west side of Lake Wheeler Road, and that would be a part of the CIP project for Lake Wheeler Road.
I might also ask the applicant about this, but so the Hamel Drive intersection, that's a fully raised table intersection?
It is raised, yes.
Okay, so the entirety of the square of the intersection is raised and change of material in terms of what's proposed?
Yes.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you. All right, I think the questions will be for the applicant. And I'll open the floor to the commission to ask questions.
Curious, how frequently are we anticipating the reverse traffic, and what type of deliveries is that going to be?
So because we do have the arrival court area, we don't see this service being used very often. It's not going to be used for things like Amazon drop-off or FedEx drop-off or things like that. Those would occur in the drop-off area off of Hamel Drive. So, and we also have the other service corridor on South Saunders that would be used more for move-in and those types of things. So this is the least of the used service spots on the site. So infrequently. I don't have a number for you, but infrequently compared to the others.
Thank you.
And what is, yeah, go ahead, Mark.
If you remember the axons, the taller building is on Saunders. So probably in terms of population, that's probably between 2/3 and 3/4 of the apartments. It's the mid-rise part that's being served by the Lake Wheeler. So preponderance of truck deliveries would be on Saunders, where we do have the turnaround.
Related to the retail operations, is that predominantly what that loading area is for?
That would support some of that retail as well, yes.
Is that, well, tell me the reason behind why there's two different service areas.
Why there are two?
Yeah.
Just the physical distance of the building, the length of it, and we felt that servicing one end of the building from the extreme opposite corner was not practical, so we felt that we needed two. Plus, we need one on Lake Wheeler for the retail that's facing that plaza. So that's how they will be serviced.
Did you explore any other potential locations or, access points for this particular loading area?
We're talking about the,
The Lake Wheeler location, the one with the reverse entry.
I'm going to go to the overall site plan, probably give a better picture. Well, number one, we didn't want it on Hamel. We want to keep Hamel pedestrian focused. So that just leaves Lake Wheeler or Saunders. And I think David did a great job explaining why they're in the specific locations. On Lake Wheeler, we're trying to maximize that retail frontage. So we want it as far north as we can for that reason, as well as to maintain a distance from the roundabout. On Saunders, we had to start at the low point to get the height clearance for the trucks, and so we can start our ramping from the parking deck at the lowest level and start ramping up. So I think when you take all those factors into consideration, those are really the best choices for these service locations.
Additional questions? I've got several more questions, I think, in the different aspect areas here, but just focusing on the plaza for a second. So that is envisioned as a court that would serve pedestrian or passenger drop-off. There would be light loading that occurs there as well.
Yeah, I would just like to point out something because of a comment. The building is not pushed back to accommodate the arrival court. The building was pushed back to create an urban space. The arrival court, we believe, helps it function. And in fact, we receive really specific input from transportation staff that what we're seeing across the city and everywhere is the increased demand for drop-off services, whether it's Uber, DoorDash, Amazon. I mean, this is increasing on a daily basis. And we believe to support the retail, we need the curbside parking, which we've provided, but we believe that we also need to accommodate this sort of, constant flow of deliveries that are happening in a safe manner, and not because otherwise they'll just pull over in the middle of the street, and we see that happen every day. So we believe that helps this function, but it's not the reason that we push the building back.
And will the plaza have bollards? What's
Yes.
to prevent the vehicles from going?
So, okay, so yes, you see around the perimeter, those are permanent bollards.
Okay.
And then you see across going left to right in green, those are knockdown bollards. So in a typical daily operation, they'll be in the down position. But let's say you want to have a special event, a festival or whatever, you can raise those and then block traffic from entering.
And then I asked transportation staff this, but just to confirm, in terms of, this sign is exactly aligned to what we've got in our materials, so this is the accurate design of this intersection?
Yes, so there's a raised table that will have distinctive paving that will blend in with the paving of the plaza and the arrival court. And then we've narrowed the roadway. We have 10-foot travel lanes, and then parallel parking, a landscape strip, and then we have a multi-use path on the north side of the street. And then we'll have material changes to clearly demarcate when pedestrians are crossing a pedestrian space. And as well as the bollards, that we've added these landscape islands to delineate the parking and separate them from the drive aisles and so forth. So all of that evolved, as Mensa mentioned, over several months of very detailed discussions, which was very helpful to us. And this is a good representation of where we arrived at.
How many drop off, like if there's a car or two dropping off people in that area, the arrival court area, how many vehicles do you think can be in there at once?
5 or 6, depending on the size of it.
Okay. Any questions further about this plaza area?
Wouldn't the knockdown bollards want to be moved to the opposite side of the sidewalk to prevent vehicles from turning in and having to back out?
The city did not want them in the right-of-way,
Understood.
so they're on the property line, on the right-of-way line.
And I mean, I assume the same thing for the stop sign.
Correct.
Yeah. The orange shaded area, that's purely for illustrative purposes. That's not going to be delineated in any way.
Right, it was just diagrammatic to show how vehicles move through there. Yep.
And then, can you speak a little bit to what's happening across the street in terms of the circulation for the phase 1 of the project?
Sure. So directly across from the plaza, adjacent to the raised tabletop, we have Kerfman Street, which serves to get you to the parking entrance for both of the buildings on phase 1. You also have the 16-foot wide streetscape that's associated with phase 1. So you will have pedestrians moving, across up and down Hamill Drive. In front of phase 1, there's retail on this corner of phase 1B. There's retail over here on phase 1A. So the idea is to direct those pedestrians to this tabletop to back and forth across Hamill in that one specific location to prevent folks from moving all up and down Hamill across the street.
And in both cases of the parking structures for those buildings, there's alternative access off of that central street.
Correct. Well, for building 1B, there's an entrance here, and then for 1A, there's an entrance off of Lake Wheeler Road. Okay. So there are 2 entrances for each building. Correct.
What's the speed on Hamill Drive? Or what's proposed?
Mensa, do you?
Can you speak into the microphone? Sorry.
I'm sorry about that. The proposed design speed should be around 25 miles per hour, but likely seeing a reduction in that with the tighter lanes and then the activated space and then having pedestrians crossing. So anticipated at 25 miles per hour or less.
Thank you.
And while you're up here, just confirming with that, this is slightly redundant from what you've previously said, but with regard to the table intersection and you get the intersection that's kind of unbraided a little bit in terms of entrance and exit on, there's no further concerns. You feel like the mitigation measures in place are adequate in terms of safety concerns at that intersection for a navigation perspective for both vehicles and pedestrians?
Yeah, we had discussions there. I think what's being proposed is adequate in terms of safety. We're talking about exiting the plaza, correct?
Exiting the plaza, the mirror side of the intersection in terms of.
And so we had discussed essentially traffic control operations at that particular intersection. I recall that, and I think you saw from the last diagram, there's a stop sign from the plaza. Additionally, from Kerfman Street, there's a stop sign stopping traffic. And I believe we have through traffic coming, right? There's no, yeah, so Hamill is free moving. So based on the stop condition and the free movement, we think that's going to be the best safety condition right now. And we can study if there's going to be issues or potential concerns out here later on. We can study those for warrants for the potential for a signal or a 4-way stop, or I guess that would be it.
And is there any concern over that kind of overlapping left turn movement from Kerfman and from the plaza?
There was some concern there. I think having the dual stop will be beneficial. I do see the point you're making. Essentially, the left turn, the northbound left turn from Kerfman is offset from the southbound left of the plaza. We did discuss that. I think when we talked through that, there also additionally access on Lake Wheeler Road from that parking deck. So vehicles can utilize that particular road, that particular access point to go north or south on Lake Wheeler, essentially negating the need to go left at that Kerfman access point.
There's the median on Lake Wheeler, correct? So that would be from the southbound direction only.
I'm talking about exiting Phase 1A
Right.
and making a right going north up Lake Wheeler.
Okay. And
Or they could utilize the roundabout to go south.
okay. There's no left-hand movement from Lake Wheeler into Phase 1A under the new design, correct? There's a median in the way?
Yes.
How much is the raised table in terms of height?
I'm not certain.
6 inches.
Okay.
Per pipe.
Okay.
Thank you for answering all these questions.
Oh,
on
no,
this.
that's what we're here for.
Are the crosswalks right at the edge of that table?
The crosswalks, are they at the edge or on the table?
They are on the table.
So they're elevated so that.
They're elevated.
So vehicles can see the
So the tabletop
pedestrians.
is elevated before it gets to the crosswalk,
So you go up the ramp.
and
to
then you
the
get.
tabletop, and then the crosswalk is on top.
Okay, yeah.
And in that fashion, the pedestrians are elevated so you can actually see them. That also will help slow down vehicles as you're seeing pedestrians crossing.
That's what I was thinking about, yeah.
Just curious, what's the plan for the future space until future happens?
You mean timing or program or which?
What are we going to see out there until future is built?
Well, I won't speak for the owner, but there have been different uses contemplated, maybe office, maybe hotel, maybe something else.
Oh, no, just like until.
Oh, in the interim.
Before that, yeah, before that's actually built.
We talked about
I see.
having areas where you could park food trucks, have, like a green space where you could have like festival type areas. It'll be a graded, it won't be flat because of the topography of the site, but it will be a space that can be used in that form or fashion, potentially, most likely.
So grass.
Yes. Maybe a little more dressed up than grass. But.
We also talked maybe some kind of recreational use, pickleball courts, whatever, something. But, well, ideally, it would not be undeveloped for very long, but we'll see what happens.
I have some questions not related to the plaza. Are there any more questions with regards to the plaza? This isn't directly related to these alternates, but it's really, is the parking deck screened in any way on the backside, on essentially the north side of the property facing towards the church property?
Let me get to that axon, just so I want to make sure. So you're talking about the section there facing the next parcel?
Essentially where that
Oh, wait, how do you
J-shaped
get rid of
green
these
mark
green
is.
things? You talking about this area?
Yes.
No, that's not screened. We're trying to, even though it is not technically an open parking structure, we're trying to maintain as much air movement as we can through there and daylight penetration.
And you can go in on the Saunders Street and
Yes,
exit
they're
out onto the
they're
Lake Wheeler.
interconnected. They enter on different levels, but they do connect. So that was an important consideration too, to have multiple points of access. It's 600, almost 700 cars.
They're interconnected, but due to the height, the service vehicle could not.
They cannot get through.
Right.
No. Only cars.
Where's the trash recycling?
In those two service areas, there are dedicated trash rooms and compactors and all that stuff.
How far from back of curb to the building is it on Lake Wheeler Road at that, where the reversal motion would occur?
The wrong way, sorry. The minimum, I want to make sure that I'm getting to the right spot where you're asking me about.
And the reason I'm asking it may be helpful is just for someone exiting from the church property from that intersection, are they going to be able to adequately see around the building corner of a vehicle exiting that parking deck?
Gotcha. So this area right here is 14 feet from backup sidewalk to face of building.
Okay. And is the north side of the parking exit there able to be seen into in any way, or is it a solid surface?
You're speaking about this wall here?
Yes.
I think it's open, but I could, it could be open. I'm not sure how we have it shown at the moment, but whoops. Yeah, we're showing an opening there, so.
How does the access on South Sanders, how does that interact with the access that's on the opposite side, where I see the Rockaway building?
How does it, I'm sorry.
So the interaction between, you're asking about having an access on South Saunders entering, right? Between that
question-
and the access to the Rockaway building, or?
Our entry,
Get to your drawing.
Oh, yeah, here. So you're showing the driveway on the, what is that, north side?
so our driveway here
Yeah. So that,
is, it's aligned with the south, with the Rockway driveway. The Rockway is not depicted in this.
So there's a driveway on the Rockway side of the street
Rockway
that
side.
aligns up with this, so it's a
yeah,
teed.
lines, okay.
Got it. With regards to the, I'll call it mid-block pedestrian crossing on South Saunders,
It's actually at the, and it doesn't show. I don't
right,
know
it's,
that we have
it's
a-
more
It's
to
at
the
the
south.
intersection of Hamel and South Saunders. So it's not technically a mid-block crossing.
Is there?
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. So why it's located there is because it's technically at the intersection.
Correct. We did not want, we at one point did have it aligned with the stairs coming down from our terrace, but pushed it to the intersection for safety because we did not want a mid-block crossing there. But we were asked to move it back to the intersection.
Okay. Yeah, and it's depicted by like this in one of the documents, but there's a pedestrian refuge in the middle, correct, at that?
There he is. That is correct.
It's a wider street width at that
Street section
location.
there, but yes, there is a concrete median there with a pedestrian refuge.
So right there where the line is that, I see like a pullout where the landscaping comes out. Is that a pullout or,
This is
yeah?
a drop-off zone.
A
Yes,
drop-off, okay.
Correct.
And what is the, just north of, or just south of that? Is that another entrance into parking?
That, to be determined, at this point, associated with Phase 2, there is a driveway here shown. I guess this is what you're talking about now. Yes, there is a driveway there that would essentially serve the Phase 2 portion of the project.
The other?
Correct.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Further questions?
I do have one question at the Lake Wheeler reverse, or actually it's a service entry area. It looks like the sidewalk is all the way up to the face of the building. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And I know you had the slide in there about the considerations for the changing the materials and so forth as far as alerting people that there's a driveway there. Would you consider putting something that pulls people off the face of the building from the sidewalk before they get to that entrance into the service area and the parking deck?
Chris, are you referencing previous examples where bollards or other things have been?
Yeah, planters, something, you know, there's a lot of cases around downtown now where the sidewalk's right up to the face of the building, and there are service areas that trucks will just pull out without even stopping or looking for pedestrians, and so just trying to create a little bit of buffer for people walking along the sidewalk to push them off that face so they can see a vehicle coming out and the vehicles can see them walking along. I've seen a lot of close calls in downtown.
Okay. I think that's something we can consider worth. I'll let you.
I think we can accommodate that so long as that doesn't make us deficient in our streetscape standards. But I would,
How wide is the sidewalk there?
14 feet.
Okay, yeah, it should be.
Yeah, I think there's another, like a blow-up plan of that area might be useful to look at.
let's see,
You're talking about the one with the reverse motion?
was it the,
All the way at the end.
oh,
That last one
Back one.
might have showed it. Yeah, right there. So when a vehicle's pulling out, just something to pull people off the face of the building on either side of that end, either side of the
so
opening.
here
Yeah,
and here.
yeah. It looked like on the other entrance on the South Saunders side, for any cars coming out of that, that entryway, the wall was actually pulled back so that people could see cars coming out, cars could see them coming up before they actually got to the sidewalk. You don't have that option here, I don't think, so just adding something there.
Well, maybe this is for Catherine. What a condition along the lines of incorporating landscaping design elements no more than 2 feet wide or 3 feet wide.
I'm saying 4, but maybe I'll rely on
4 feet
the
wide.
expertise of our, because I don't want to hem you in either.
Casey or Catherine, I think the one of previous case I'm thinking of is like 330 West Target Street. We did something similar in terms of the language.
I can
yeah.
also tell you that, and we might need to maybe just
Right, let's,
break for just a few minutes to write the language out so we make sure it's right.
and we're not necessarily to the point of a
Getting,
of a
okay.
motion on an
Yeah, we can
amendment,
work
yeah.
on something, and maybe you want to work on something, and then we can make sure we're all have a meeting of the minds before you do anything. I'll also tell you, I did pull the 3 conditions, the exact language that you used from your written decision from DA 13/2022, which I have, that mirrors the 3 conditions that were offered. The language that you used was a little bit more, has a little bit more specificity in it for enforceability reasons. And anyway, whenever you're ready, I have that if you'd like to hear that too.
We are comfortable using the previous design alternates language for this case as well.
Okay. Thank you. Was that the,
Yeah, maybe related to that, so the very north side, where cars are going to be coming out of that parking deck, you said that's an open wall? Is that an open wall?
What was the question?
Where cars are going to be coming out of the parking deck,
Right.
is that an open wall, plan north?
This wall here?
Yeah,
Yes, section of that is open.
okay. And does the sidewalk, looks like the sidewalk is pushed off the face of the building in that very north section. Is that depicted accurately, or is that actually going to, is the sidewalk going to come all the way to the
I'm
corner?
not sure, David, what that's representing. He's asking the sidewalk.
That little void that,
Right, so the sidewalk from back of curb to the property line there is the 14-foot wide sidewalk that's required. So that is an accurate representation of what that sidewalk width would be.
Okay, so right where you drew the arrow, just to the right of that, that's not concrete?
Green space.
Green space, okay, thanks.
So was your previous comment that people walking here wouldn't hug the edge of the building where they couldn't see cars and trucks? So yeah, I think, David, we could just make this landscape
Yeah.
space.
Correct.
This, anyway.
That area is
Absolutely.
not required to
Yeah.
be sidewalk. We've already
Landscape or
been-
Absolutely.
planner, we don't need to, be specific, but the
Yep.
intent is, yeah.
Absolutely. Why not?
Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions right now. Anything further from the applicant before we deliberate? Worth, I'm looking at, you good? Okay. Anything further from staff? Okay, great. Hearing no additional questions or presentation of relevant facts, the commission will now close the hearing and bring the matter to the table. As a reminder, this commission is tasked with deciding if, based on the evidence presented, this proposal meets the applicable standards. This decision cannot be based on the personal preference of commission members, rather it is based on standards and evidence. If based on its deliberations, the commission requires additional evidence, the commission will reopen the hearing. Okay, I think we should probably tackle this in the component parts of what requests are being asked for, or the alternates. So let's probably start with the build 2 as one of the more straightforward components, and let's do the reverse motion last. Any thoughts, questions, comments on build 2?
Yeah, we're talking about the Hamill Drive, the plaza area. Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, last case I talked about precedent, and I think this case I would talk about it as well. And that, but in the reverse order, I wish this sets a precedent that I wish more people would do. More architects and clients would look at the broader picture of how this project impacts and communicates with the space next to it, and what's going to happen there. I think that's I think it's a smart move to make a public space there.
Yeah, this to me is the spirit of the Appearance Commission, now Design Review Commission, of a alternate design that is in a way equal to or superior in a fashion here. So the build 2 makes sense to me, especially in how it's conceptualized here of how they might use that space that otherwise would go to that. And obviously Hamill Drive does not have an existing street wall or anything really to respond to here other than the existing development.
Especially with the proximity to the park and the connection to the other development that's already there. This is creating a centralized mini park next to the park that's going to be activated and.
Yeah, it's
be
a
a
very
very vibrant area.
conscientious move to only support what we're already going for, is this pedestrian, bike-friendly, activate, the area with movement. So.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the build 2. I do think it creates some design consequences for other things.
Yeah, no, I
But
think it's
I-
a really nice erosion of the building on that corner. I think my only concern was the safety. So in the findings, you have to talk about the safety and the safety of that motor court coming into that area. And I think since transportation staff is comfortable with it, I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah,
I think they've really worked with transportation to create good solutions.
Right. We drilled down into that a good bit. I mean, there's definitely transportation conflicts there that do create some safety issues, but there's been a lot of thoughtfulness into the materiality, the raised table, the alternative access points to that site that I think it's as mitigated as it possibly can. And staff said also that they'll monitor it and potentially propose further options if traffic safety is an issue.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah, I mean, I was just agreeing with you all. I think the consideration was given to all the elements that at least I had concerns about. So I think it's been well thought through.
I think it could be a confusing intersection to navigate.
Yeah.
if you're a
Which is-
guest to the property.
Which is why slowing down is going to be important, so, yeah.
You know, if you've got a 6-inch raised table, no one's going to be taking that too fast, but I mean, there's not anything like it that I can think of in Raleigh currently, so it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed with transportation here, the speed limit on that, and my recommendation would be the lower end of things, but trying to keep that down. But again, I'm really impressed with the amount of collaboration that seems to be happening with transportation, on many subjects.
I think, it's just an aside here, I would say, I think functionally cars are going to pull all the way to the intersection, and that's where they'll choose to stop, on essentially in the pedestrian right of way, but
They're gonna want to see the oncoming cars, so. But the good thing is when you're coming out, you're looking to your left because you're looking to both sides, but it's easy to see to your left, but to your right might be something that we should think about because there's also landscaping right up against.
yeah, that was my
that, too.
only
Yeah.
figment of an idea here is, if you wanted to, would you want to restrict outbound from the court to just be right out as a means of limiting that overlapping left turn movement?
Actually, might help, yeah.
But I don't know if that's necessary or not at the speeds we're talking about.
Maybe if we can ask some additional information about the landscaping and how the view is coming out of that plaza, that might help to know what can say yes or
Yeah,
no.
and to be clear, we defer to you a bit here as a expert in this regard. We can definitely ask that question in a minute. Any further comments on this particular element of the request? Okay, we're going to open back up the hearing. Did you catch that question with regards to the landscaping there at that pedestrian or that court?
Spoke with Mensa briefly. Instead of some landscaping or barrier that decreases the sidewalk width, would signage of some sort that says reverse vehicle movement on either side of that entrance kind of accomplish the goal of putting pedestrians on notice? Or I'm just thinking
Sorry,
too about the
We're
law.
talking about two different things, but
We're over at the service court, or the access
court,
court, the drive court on Hamel.
So what was the request on Hamel?
there's a question with regards to what the landscaping proposed
Where the
is at the
plaza, the way out of the arrival court is.
I think we've got a slide to.
Well, the intent is that it would just be low ground cover type,
So it's
nothing that would be, impede your view. It'd just be low.
There wouldn't be like a,
Sorry?
there wouldn't be a wall or something that would be used for
No.
signage there or anything.
In fact, that's one of my pet peeves is when you park next to an island in a parking lot and it's got shrubbery and you can't even open your door. No, it's just low, but we wanted something that created a demarcation of, to distinguish between parking and drive or parking and pedestrian, that's all.
Yeah, that was the only concern, just kind of coming out what the drivers are going to be able to see.
Yeah, we don't want to compromise the view triangles.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll close the hearing again. Any further thoughts?
That's good for me.
Where that feedback coming from, but it gives away, thankfully. Okay, moving on to if everyone's comfortable talking about that section, let's move on to the transparency requests as the middle couple of requests. Thoughts, concerns, with regards to, what is it?
I have no
yeah.
concerns. I mean, the area that they're talking about is more of a service area, and we've had multiple projects come before
Yeah.
us that have
These
the
build-
same difficulties. and-
These buildings have to function. I have no concerns.
Yeah.
Yeah, me
I
neither.
agree.
It's part of urban design.
I think it's one of the smartest, places that they could do it and done the right thing.
Okay, I'm seeing no question on the transparency. So then, I believe that brings us to the reverse motion as the only other design alternate request. Driveway spacing, thank you. Driveway spacing. Concerns, thoughts?
I have some concerns, but I think they've explained pretty well about what they're doing, so I feel okay.
It helps me that the proposed configuration in both cases is, South Saunders will be a 2-lane road in the new configuration. That's helpful. And then the right in, right out with the median, that's helpful.
I think
From just a pure driveway to driveway.
I think the only maybe interim situation that you mentioned, before Lake Wheeler actually gets widened and the right and right out is in place, does that mean that the access on the side, on Lake Wheeler operates as full access at that point?
Yeah.
Or do we have something in place until the actual widening happens?
That's true. I think, if we're taking into account the existing condition, the existing use also is not a high-frequency use of that driveway immediately to the north, except certain, times of the week. So that helps.
Is that a condition where they could put up those kind of plastic lane dividers to separate the 2 lanes and deter?
Can you speak in your microphone?
Sorry, is that a condition where they could use those kind of plastic
The flexi
bollards?
posts?
Yeah, and
Bollards?
deter that kind of movement?
That could be an option, but I would leave that to the discretion of the transportation
Yeah.
group, department, because they might have a standard for something like that, so.
We see cases like this, and sometimes we will focus in on the building edge and, parking deck. If you're exiting parking deck at speed, coming out in the ability for the next driveway down or pedestrians to be able to see that. It seems to me like the building is set back far enough that it's already mitigated a little bit. The sidewalk certainly doesn't go all the way to the building. Currently, it's shown as semi-transparent in some capacity. Is that enough of a concern to warrant something more specific there? Or, if that northern edge of the building were to be completely opaque, would that be an issue in terms of that parking deck exit?
Maybe that is an incentive, yeah. I mean, I think it helps. Yeah, it helps the situation. Yeah, I think it helps.
And then on the South Saunders Street, I'm seeing no concerns with that location. I think teeing it up to the other side of the street makes
That makes
a great
more
deal of
sense,
sense.
yeah. As I was looking at the parcels early on, I thought that was staggered too, so that was my concern first, but
Yeah, the building's, feels like it's set further back from the curb or will functionally have more visibility there too, so.
yeah.
that-
I'd rather it be closer to the north side driveway than South Saunders for sure, because South Saunders and Hamrell, they're not, the angle is probably, well, it's actually not that bad, I guess. I was thinking maybe it was a little bit more skew, but yeah.
Well, and I think in the future, as the future project comes in and that entrance is going to be there, it is maximizing the space between those two. So it's a good decision for the future
That's true.
phase.
That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah, whatever that other business is, it's just down the road. I mean, you can tell that there's not a lot of car traffic coming out of that driveway.
Okay, and then we're going to move on to the reverse motion. You've got a thought?
As long as transportation's comfortable that there's a solution, I don't see a problem. I don't have an issue.
Okay.
Chuck's going to have to back into this building, and I agree that preserving the retail space is a worthy pursuit over having a giant under-building turnaround that kills the point of the project, or not kills, but
Are those the
is
only
counter
two?
to the point of the project.
Are those the only two alternatives?
I'm not designing the project, so I'm just
Yeah.
looking at what they're showing, and I think if the transportation department is comfortable with it, then I am too.
Did we hear any other options that were considered? Or can we?
Yeah. I think there were some questions that were to that effect, but maybe not so directly. Yeah, this is unusual context for us. Oftentimes, we're contemplating this reverse motion in a truly urban context.
Right.
Where you've got tighter block space, block perimeter, urban grid, where you just have more of a pedestrian experience that's intuitive to that. This gives me a little bit of concern, obviously, being directly across from a park very near to a regional playground asset. It's not outside of the question of there being a high degree of traffic of kids and other things. More so even than in an urban context, right, of having that type of playground asset across the street. So it doesn't mean that they haven't adequately mitigated it with what they've offered, and I appreciate all of the thought and looking to previous examples of where we've asked for those measures to be put in place.
Yeah.
And I think that they've looked into, having an attendant come out and, be present when there is the actual motion going on. A good solution.
Yeah, and I would say pretty much all cases where we've accepted that, that's been a condition, is that there be a operator.
Those conditions, are those all three? They're not either, just one of them,
They're
right?
all
Three has
yeah.
to be there. Okay, that's comforting for sure, yeah.
And I would still advocate for another condition to have something there at that southern side of the entry portal that pulls people off the face of the building, whether it's landscaping or whatever it is. Can we leave it at the judgment of the staff reviewing the project versus defining a certain distance people need to be pulled off the face?
Yeah, you need to give them a little bit of guidance, though. I don't think you can't give them the full discretion to do that, because they're not supposed, that would be giving away your decision-making authority. There is some proposed language that the applicant has, condition language for that, if you want me to read to you what they have. The project shall incorporate landscaping or physical barrier, for example, bollards for 10 linear feet on either side of the loading dock entrance along Lake Wheeler Road to lessen that sidewalk width closest to the building by at least 4 feet.
I mean, the 4 feet part is what I'm questioning. I mean, I don't know if 4 feet's the right amount, so.
And I don't know that the 10 linear feet makes full sense just based off of what's to the north of that, but.
And because it's a different entrance into the service area than it is into the parking deck, so you can't have 10 feet on either side of the service entry, because you'll be blocking.
You block in the.
You block, not only blocking the entrance into the parking deck, but you're also putting some, something where the trucks are going to be backing up over it. So I would only think that that condition would be on the south side of this, the service entrance.
So we can talk about the 10 linear feet, but it would be on, so say either side, it should be on the south side.
Is there any utility, this is to Chris, there's that tiny bit of a island there in the middle between the two entrances of there being a bollard there. It's not truly, pedestrians going to sidestep in the, but.
I personally think it's just the south side, but open to other opinions.
I think that's
the intent here is obviously just to have a physical feature that pushes a pedestrian off of the building face.
Yeah, because anybody coming.
Access door there too, so you don't want them coming out of the access door, turning immediately.
Right.
and stepping right into the path of the truck or whatever, so.
Right, and anybody walking from the north, going south, is already gonna realize they're walking in front of a parking deck entrance. And so they're not gonna be hugging that wall, they're gonna be, walking away from the face of the building before they get to that service entrance.
Yeah, I would agree with the south side of that as well, your comments. I think even having one bollard sitting out there is probably going to cause more injuries than anything else.
Yeah.
So,
Catherine, you had a comment earlier on more specific language for those three conditions?
Yeah, I can
previously.
read them to you whenever you're ready for those ones.
Can we resolve the 4 feet versus something else?
Sure.
Do you want to give a minimum? Is there a number that you would say no less than, and then they can have discretion to do more?
3 feet. It's the door leaf, probably.
I thought four
Well,
was
we've
reasonable.
drafted it
Plus a
as a
foot.
minimum
Yeah.
standard
I thought
by
four was reasonable.
at least 4 feet is the, so there is a floor to that width reduction, but
Yeah.
if there's a higher floor, we'll take a look at that as well.
I mean, four feels comfortable to me.
It does, yeah.
I'm fine with 4. Just going back to the motion that was proposed, can you read it again?
Yeah, and so I think was just south side was the change? Okay. The project shall incorporate landscaping or a physical barrier, for example, bollards for 10 linear feet on the south side of the loading dock entrance along Lake Wheeler Road to lessen that sidewalk width closest to the building by at least 4 feet.
Do we need the 10 linear feet?
What was the question?
Do we need the 10, to even reference the 10 linear feet to the south? And do we need to specify, for example, bollard?
how many?
You don't have to, you can take that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think physical barrier, Casey, I'm going to look at you to see if that's specific enough for staff, plan review staff.
Yeah, I think using physical barrier or landscaping would be specific enough that would allow the flexibility to figure out what makes the most sense, but specific enough that they couldn't propose, I don't know, a flag or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Something.
Good.
Yeah, I'm
Not
not a big
mean-
fan of bollards. I just think it interferes with the visual.
Right.
Yeah.
It can be done totally fine, but I'd rather leave it more open to what fits the building. And then on the 10 linear feet, sorry, that question I had.
That seems reasonable to me. I mean,
Me too.
if you want to do a minimum and just leave it there, that's fine too.
Does that conflict with that doorway?
It does, it would have to break at the door. And then it looks like there's
there's a door
another
right there.
small retaining wall the further south you go. I would just rely on the designers to do the right thing to make it look right at the end of the day.
Do we need to provide the linear feet?
I don't think so.
That is intended to set a minimum on, the width of this reduction. I mean, if you take the 10 feet out, theoretically, I could do a 1-foot grass strip that reduces the sidewalk by 4 feet. So I was putting that in there just to say, well, for a minimum of 10 feet, we'll have this sidewalk width reduction.
Right,
But
I
again,
think
if there's another,
I think there's a door,
Yeah, if
there's an
there's a
access door
barrier.
that's within that 10 feet.
Actually, the 10 feet may not even get to the door, so I think 10 feet's fine.
Yeah, if you can navigate to the reverse turn template might have it.
too many slides. So, it's,
I mean, if you don't have anything that 10 feet obstructs, we're fine with that. But if there is any, that's what we're trying
Yeah,
to
we
be
don't want to put you
aware
in
of.
a,
Yeah.
you don't want to have like somebody walk over landscaping to get into a boutique store. Right, yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Casey.
That was they proposed the 10 feet. So, okay.
I was just going to say, I quickly scaled out the drawing, the PDF, and it looks like the distance between the edge of the driveway and that door is like 11 feet. If that gives you some perspective on the distance.
So
to
let's
work
say,
with.
say
5 feet and have it be safe.
minimum 5 feet, and then they can design it to
Yeah.
look correct.
We would agree to that.
glad you questioned that.
I think we're clear on this specific condition. Do you want to approach the other three in terms of the difference in language?
Sure. Do you want me to just read to you? I've just taken those other ones and inserted the street names for here, and I'll just read them out to you. Does that work? Okay.
Can we just bring up the ones that are in the presentation today on the slide?
Yeah, I would.
I haven't seen either one properly, so I just want to have some clarity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So number one, the project will provide a change in material type or color for the portion of the sidewalk that abuts the reverse movement driveway located off of Lake Wheeler Road. All right, number two, one on-site employee shall be present when vehicles are accessing the reverse movement driveway located off of Lake Wheeler Road to provide traffic control. All right, number three, the applicant must provide a turn template to city staff to show that vehicles accessing the reversed movement driveway located off of Lake Wheeler Road will have a sufficient turning radius to allow the vehicles accessing the driveway to safely maneuver into and out of the area accessed by the driveway. The turn template must be provided to and accepted by city transportation staff as meeting this condition prior to the approval of the ASR associated with the design alternate request, ASR 0001-2024.
Can you read the first one again? Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, the first one.
The project will provide a change in material type or color for the portion of the driveway that abuts the reverse movement driveway located off of Lake Wheeler Road.
So just to break down the difference there, we have in the past typically phrased it the way Catherine said, of a change in materiality or color. But in this case, we have both a parking deck exit and a loading zone. So that was one slight difference in terms of your insertion of changing the language there. So if we were going to use your language, we would want it to be both the parking deck entrance and the loading entrance to be all one change of material color.
Okay, their proposed one said just the reverse movement driveway. So it would be for both driveways off of Lake Wheeler Road?
I guess I'll ask that question to the commission, but does it make sense to have the one entrance?
I mean, we're not doing it on the South Saunders
Yeah.
side.
We'll be inconsistent on the other side.
I feel like this is another, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was
guess-
done, yeah.
I was going to say, I feel like this is another instance of if they're going to do it in front of the service entrance, maybe they will decide to, like, the right thing to do in the design is to take it that far, but without more study, I wouldn't want to hem them into having to do that.
I do think just having it in front of the reverse movement driveway does give more attention to it versus the other
But does
one.
it-
So it'll keep focus on,
After you've traversed it as a pedestrian and you get to the parking deck entrance, if the material's different there, do you think that you're past the,
perspective, yeah,
I don't want to go over in the weeds on this, I just,
right.
I personally prefer to leave it just in front of the service entrance in the condition, and then they can decide to do something more than that if they think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. And I think if we said, do it on the Lake Wheeler side entrance, I think we should be consistent and do it on the South Saunders, but then that becomes,
I mean, they've shown in the plans that there's a change of material for both of the entrance and exits, but
okay.
do we feel like there's a material difference of color versus material and requiring that versus just leaving it up to the design? I
What's that
recall in
question?
some cases we have said there needs to be a change of materiality, not just a change of color.
Right now it says or.
Or in
And
their
that's from a
motion, it's in parentheses, so.
Yeah, that came from, the prior companion case, DA 13, 2022.
So obviously, of all of these, the most critical one here is the employee being present to supervise the reverse motion.
I mean, I don't really personally have a problem with, or I don't have a problem with color change as long as it's a traffic-rated material that, you know, has the durability to handle traffic.
I don't want to get into too much detail, but one of the things to think about color is like, as per ADA requirements, there is certain color differentiation they can, I mean, that works and that doesn't work. So I think the standards generally adhere to that. But
Yeah. Okay. Do we like the previous conditions better in terms of specificity?
just more specific.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, any changes to the,
Can
to
you read
what
the fourth,
Catherine
the
read?
fourth one, the new one?
One more time. Okay, the project shall incorporate landscaping or a physical barrier for a minimum of 5 linear feet on the south side of the loading dock entrance along Lake Wheeler Road to lessen that sidewalk width closest to the building by at least 4 feet. I don't know. You might, I would also just, you might want to confirm with the, yeah.
So if you're following along, Catherine has proposed a slightly alternate wording for these 1 through 3, based off of what previously has been motions of the commission. Are you comfortable with those 3 wordings?
Yes, we are comfortable using the language that was approved in the previous design alternate and with the language, excuse me, that Catherine just recited. So all good with all 4 of those.
Okay. Anything further from the commission in terms of requests here to make? No? Kyle, you?
Just wondering if we could motion.
Yeah, okay. So let's do this one separately from the rest, just so we get this motion right. And the others should be more straightforward. So would you like to?
Yep. I'd like to motion to approve the driveway spacing request, the build-to request, and the ground story transportation request as presented.
With the conditions
Oh,
as,
I-
yeah.
Oh, and the 3, or is it 4?
Are we doing all 4? Okay.
4 conditions, as Catherine just stated, and like the motion to approve.
Catherine, do you feel like you need to restate those, or?
I'm glad to do it, but I think we all are, I think they're in the record.
Okay.
I would second that motion.
Okay, Jason, seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, seeing none.
Should we take a quick 5-minute break?
Sure, hold on one second. The commission's written decision will be adopted when the minutes of this meeting are adopted, and the written decision will be provided to the applicant and other parties with the right to such notice following adoption of the decision. Thank you. We're going to take a very brief 5-minute recess here, and then we'll be back to do the last design alternate on the agenda. order. And just a quick note for commissioners and for folks using the podium, please speak into the microphone so that way folks online and in the recording can hear you. I'll try and flag that as we go, but
Did we lose Dane?
we have lost Dane, so we're able to proceed. 5's our hard number, but yes. All right. We'll now continue to the evidentiary hearing for item DA 5, 2024. Casey, if you will introduce this hearing.
This property is located at the northeast corner of Lewisburg Road and Forestville Road with the address of 8601 Lewisburg Road. The property is zoned commercial mixed use, 3 stories, conditional use. The applicant is proposing to construct a general building for a new Sheetz fuel station, convenience store, and drive-through restaurant. They're requesting 3 design alternates. Design alternate to reduce the transparency of the proposed glass windows on the south and west sides of the building. A design alternate to reduce the ground story transparency on the south side of the building. And a design alternate to locate the service area in front of the building. So, as we've talked about, there's a minimum amount of transparency that's required. So in this case, for a general building in CX, they're required to have 33% transparency on the ground story. In addition to that, the UDO does require that glass be at least 80% transparent to be counted towards that transparency requirement, specifically on the ground floor. You've seen these several times already tonight, the findings for transparency. And then the other request has to do with the service area or the dumpster enclosure location. Those are required by the UDO to be located to the side or rear of buildings and to be screened from adjacent properties and right-of-way. They have to be screened by a solid wall and gate at least 6 feet tall. And here are the 4 findings that need to be met in order to grant a design alternate for the service area screening requirements. With that, I will turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you, Casey. Worth Mills, Longleaf Law Partners, 4509 Creedmoor Road, Suite 302, Raleigh, NC 27612. We have some folks from both Sheetz and PAPS Design Group. I'll have them introduce themselves and then swear them in.
Okay, so if one by one, if you could say your name, relation to the case, address, and then afterwards I'll swear all of you in simultaneously.
Great. Brian Downs, I'm an entitlement manager at Sheetz, meaning I'm a corporate employee. Address is 5700 6th Avenue, Altoona, Pennsylvania.
Great.
Good evening. My name is Dan Paps. I'm the engineer of record with Paps Design Group. Address is 107 Fayetteville Street, Raleigh, Suite 200.
Hello, I'm Josh Lee, Paps Design Group, 107 Fayetteville Street.
And do each of you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Okay. An affirmative from all 3 folks. Thank you.
Thank you all. So just a summary of the design requests. The first being on the level of transparency that we are using for our glazing. The UDO requires at least 80% transparency. We are proposing a glass that is 38% transparency. The second item is for the required transparency between 3 feet and 8 feet of the facade. And again, on that south building facade facing Lewisburg Road, we are asking for a design alternate to allow 42.91% of our required transparency between 3 and 8 feet. And lastly, relief to allow us to locate the trash and recycling collection area slightly in front of the building, just slightly closer towards Lewisburg Road. As Casey mentioned, our property is at the corner of Lewisburg and Forestville Road. The property is zoned CX3 CU. It was part of a larger rezoning back in 2021, Z-34-20. And I'll note as well, the portion that is going to be a Sheets is really in this southwest corner of the larger parcel as it exists today. Here is a site plan that I can talk a little bit through since it's tough to see. Two things I wanted to point out. We have access onto Forestville, and we have a right-in, right-out onto Lewisburg Road as well. We do have TCA between the building and Lewisburg Road, shown there in those green dashed lines. Our fuel canopy is here between the building and Forestville Road. We do have drive-through facilities on the rear of the building, outlined there in blue, and just to add some purple. This is the location of the dumpster and recycling area. Again, just slightly in front of the building, a little bit closer than the building is to Lewisville Road. Here's the building elevation for that south-facing facade, the one facing Lewisburg Road. This is the building elevation that we are seeking the transparency request for between 3 and 8 feet. You can see here our provided transparency is just under 43%. I will note that we have glazing above that 12-foot, 12 feet above finished grade in this area as well, just to try to compensate for the lack of transparency in that 3-foot to 8-foot range. You can also see here awnings on all of the proposed windows, including the awning for the main entrance. We have the cupola at the main entrance, and you can see as well some outdoor seating options on the left-hand side. This is a building elevation west facing Forestville Road. The only transparency request that pertains to this facade is for that type of glass that we are requesting, again, a 38% transparency. Here you can also see more awnings, another view of that cupola, and better see that outdoor seating area. This is to the north, and this is to the east. So the transparency request. So as from the UDO, for glass to be considered transparent on a ground floor, it must have a transparency higher than 80% and an external reflectance less than 15%. And a general building in the CX zoning district must have at least 33% ground floor transparency for those facades that face Lewisburg Road and Forestville Road. The type of glass that Sheets wants to incorporate is called Pilkington Eclipse Advantage Bronze Glazing, also known as solar control energy glazing or low E glazing. It is designed to minimize solar heat gain and control glare. Some other advantages include provides a reduction in energy costs and energy usage for each Sheets across the country, making a substantial impact on their carbon footprint. This type of glazing also prevents spoilage and damage to products inside the store from heat and light coming into the building. And it also just provides a more comfortable setting for both employees and patrons. And on the bottom right-hand side, you can see a screen grab from the Pilkington website kind of showing the look and style and the statistics of this type of glazing. So here I wanted to show from an intent perspective, if we assume that the glass that we're proposing to use is approved by this Design Review Commission, we will be meeting the minimum transparency requirements on both our south and west elevation building facades. I've got a slide here that talks a little bit about that solar control energy glazing, and it shows here in the right-hand side kind of a representation of the visual light spectrum, how this glass is going to interact with light. What this glass is intending to do is to minimize the amount of infrared light that gets through the glass into the store, causing higher temperatures, causing product spoilage and damage, and the necessity to increase your energy costs to offset those infrared rays passing through. For purposes of reducing energy consumption, the ideal glass has the highest levels of visibility with the lowest levels of infrared penetrating, and you can see that here in the right-hand corner. There is a compromise between infrared protection and that transparency requirement, which is why we are asking for this request. But to show you what it looks like, here's a rendering of what that glass looks like. I also want to point out the different building materials that are used on the facade. So at the kind of the ground level, up to 3 feet at waist height, Sheets is incorporating stone, and that stone continues up the cupola for that main entrance. Using brick facade in other places, awnings for all windows, as well as those awnings around the general entrance and that side entrance on the left-hand side. And also you can see here that outdoor seating, which lends visual interest for a pedestrian. Here's a photo of some of this low E glazing. It looks a little bit more tinted than perhaps a standard glass pane, but again, that's to help reduce that infrared penetration. Here's another photo during the day. And here's a photo at night, just to see how it looks at multiple times of the day. This slide shows the list of building materials that will be used on the building. This includes everything from building facade finishes, the building materials for the awning, the cupola, as well as the types of brick pavers that we would use for the walkway. So incorporating a lot of different building materials to create visual interest, break up that blank wall area and that building massing for anybody that's walking around or coming to park here. One thing I will also point out, and it kind of speaks to the intent of the transparency requirements, and again, that intent is to lend that visual interest for pedestrians as well as folks traveling by vehicle. Again, we've got a lot of screening between both of our streets and the building. So all that area in green there is existing tree conservation area. And then we also have the fuel canopy between the building and Forestville Road. So either by natural or man-made site layout, the amount of visual interest that any building is going to provide here would be quite minimal. Just want to take you through the two transparency requests and recite the standards. So first, the approved design alternate is consistent with the intent of the transparency requirements. Again, the intent is to lend that visual interest to street-facing building facades and minimize blank wall areas. Again, if you look at some of these slides, just a passerby would say, that is a building that does have a wide array of building materials. It does break up kind of the monotony of the building, and it gives you a fairly high level of visibility into the building itself. The second standard, the street-facing facade utilizes other architectural, artistic, or landscaped treatments to create visual interest to offset the reduction in transparency. And again, we're talking here about that 3 foot to 8 foot standard. There's transparency above that 12-foot kind of minimum ground floor height for the cupola. There's outdoor seating. There's changes of building materials, all of which, tries to create that visual interest and attract people to the store. The next request that I want to cover is the request to allow that recycling and trash collection area slightly in front of the building closest to Lewisburg Road. So again, the UDO requires that these be located to the side or the rear of the building. And it is, located to the side of the building. It's not, in any way a focal point of the layout. But the reason that we incorporated it here is due to the fact that we have drive-through operations on the backside of the building. So you can see the drive-through there, and you can see the drive-through here. That leaves, a lot of that area to be undisturbed with respect to trash recycling collection. And you can see the path that we have for, you can see it on the screen, these little dotted lines that trash collection trucks coming from Forestville Road, turning right and then right into the site, avoiding the drive-through areas, going directly to the trash collection area, and then continuing on a right out onto Lewisburg Road. So we think that the way that the site is set up here, locating the dumpster where it is, it gets the truck in and out as quickly and efficiently as possible. And it does so without interfering with those drive-through operations and getting people on to either Lewisburg or Forestville Road. All in all, we think it's a safer design for the collection folks as well as for people using the drive-through itself. I wanted to show the dumpster enclosures. So here on the bottom left-hand side, you can see the building materials that would be used to encircle the trash and dumpsters. Brick facade with, sorry about that, with that dark brown gate to really match the exterior of the sheets itself. There will be landscaping around this enclosure. If we go here, there would be a total of 15 shrubs on the north and east side. And on the south side, we would have 4 larger, more, a taller, mature height shrub. Both of those are evergreen shrubs to better screen that from Lewisburg Road. So just to run through the design alternate standards, the approved design alternate is consistent with the intent of the landscape and screening regulations. That intent is to provide meaningful and well-designed screening and buffering that does not interfere with safe vehicular and pedestrian circulation. And again, we've tried to locate this dumpster in an area that interferes as little as possible with the everyday usage of this sheets, having very little interaction with drive-throughs and getting those trucks in and out as quickly as possible. The approved alternate does not substantially negatively impact the comfort and safety of pedestrians. Dumpster is located internal to the site, but it is set back from all sideways and away from pedestrian paths. And again, that dumpster location provides the safest and most practical area for those trucks to access it without interfering with any of the patrons or employees. Third, the approved alternate utilizes other architectural or landscaping treatments to create visual interest. Again, we think we have a very high quality enclosure of brick with that gate that matches the color palette of the sheets itself. And we also have incorporated different types of screening on all sides of that enclosure with a focus being on higher screening towards Lewisburg Road. Finally, the approved alternate is considered equal to or better than the standard. And again, I think that this dumpster location is at least equal to what the UDO standard is because of the well screening, because of the building materials that we're using to enclose it, and because it's located to avoid interactions with folks in their cars or walking from their cars to the sheets itself. So for those reasons, we respectfully ask this commission to approve all 3 design alternates. Our team is here if you have any questions, and we appreciate your time this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public present who would like to comment? I'm seeing none. Any questions from the commission? Again, seeing none. Anything further from staff or the applicant? Good. Okay. We will now close the hearing and bring the matter to the table. As a reminder, the commission is tasked with deciding if, based on the evidence presented, the proposal meets the applicable standards. The decision cannot be based on personal preference. Rather, it is based on standards and evidence. If based on deliberations, the commission requires additional evidence, the commission will reopen the hearing. Thoughts? Wherever you want to start. Can you speak in the microphone?
For the dumpster location, they were showing the dumpster, the trucks backing into, right?
It was the front approach.
It's a front into the garbage area, but then coming back as a backup, right? Yeah. And that is that a road that connects to the driveway to the side? And I'm just a little concerned that it's in the pathway of the drive-through, one thing, and also in the pathway of the exit, or even that connection to that side road on the north side.
So what you're saying is you have a little bit of concern with regards to the backwards motion from the dumpster being in the way of the driveway motion?
Mm-hmm. And 2 of them, drive-through as well as the driveway that's going out onto Lewisburg.
Gotcha.
I'm happy to speak to that. So yes, it's inherent.
On 1 second, sorry. And thank you. Did you have a question for them, or did you have just a comment?
For us to talk about, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, we've seen these quite a bit in other projects, and looks similar. One thing that we tend to talk about that I would like to know, it seems kind of light on landscaping around it, at first look to me. I would like to probably see more landscaping on the south side of that, but I'm not sure. I would defer to our landscape architects here to the types of plants, heights, and things such as that.
Yeah, it's a very small space in that little island area there, south of the dumpster. But you had stated, or they had stated, that it was going to be taller, more substantial screening. I don't know what the plants are. Do we have a landscape plan that we can look at? I don't know if there's one.
There's in the agenda materials,
There's one here. And if y'all want to speak to your landscaping plan, I'll let you do that.
Sure, and we'll reopen the hearing if you want to address that. Thank you.
Good evening. So I've got Josh Sleeve in here. He's our landscape designer. He's been in the design world for 10 plus years. Master's at NC State landscape architecture. I'm an engineer, so I'm not going to unintelligently speak to the species that are here. I will say that this matter has come before the board prior, and the species and plantings that were proposed here a separate board had recommended those, but we're always up for other plannings. Should you have something that you recommend that might work better to consider, we're certainly okay with that.
Having looked at the plan, I mean, it's a very well adapted species for that location and for screening.
Okay.
That
answers your
my
question.
question.
Thank you. We'll close the hearing again. Other, I'm very open-minded if you've got a specific concern or even a way of addressing it. I feel this is fairly consistent with cases that we've seen, previously, and just, generally speaking, that motion is common, but defer to you as more of the expert in that regard.
I mean, I'd say that the backward motion is very minimal, and then that they can proceed forward. But any dumpster truck's going to have to back a little bit because just the nature of how they function.
Yeah.
As to the location of the dumpster, given the tree conservation area plus, just the nature of that site, I feel like it's not really in a location that's of concern, and it's very consistent with what we've seen previously in terms of materiality and screening, and I don't know if anyone feels differently about that, but we've seen similar projects here. I'm trying to recall from the transparency with the bronze glazing. That obviously comes up consistently. I'm just trying to remember how we've previously.
Well, we've talked about it before that there probably needs to be a text change at some point written around this, because for commercial glazing, you're not going to get an insulated glass that's 80% transparent, period.
Yep.
So it's kind of a ridiculous requirement in the UDO.
So I take that as you're not concerned with that level of transparency.
I did appreciate the night and day.
Yeah, that was
shots,
helpful.
and that was helpful to me.
And then as far as the amount of the relief from the transparency requirement, 43% in lieu of the 50%. I know we've had this request on similar projects before, and knowing that there's shelf space, wall space below those windows, that, I mean, you could play games with where you have the sidewalk, like the grade of the sidewalk. They could lift it up by a few inches to get some of the glass above that area, that 8-foot line to count. I mean,
Yeah.
But they've actually got a significant amount of glass above that 8-foot line, which I think offsets the requirement, plus all the other architectural treatments on that facade, so I don't have a concern with that either.
I agree. I feel like it definitely gets to the intent here with the scale of the building, and we've seen different permutations of this. It's more painful for us when the driveway is on the side facing the street, and then we've got less, but this particular side of the building is one that has more things going for it.
Yeah, and I think what's going on in the interior of the building, it looks like the beverage kind of counter there. I think it's probably the best solution for if that's going to be the interior layout. And
And there's the transparency above it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be a nice quality of light with the awnings there on the south side. I think it's going to work really well.
Any other thoughts, or would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. Do I have to be very specific? Or?
Just
Motion with all the-
a move to approve is
Move
all
to-
we
yeah.
need. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Thank you, guys. Committee's written decision will be adopted with the minutes of this meeting are adopted, and the written decision will be provided to the applicant and other parties with right to such notice following adoption of the decision. Okay, that concludes our quasi-judicial portion of the meeting. We've already taken care of minutes. Catherine, do you have any?
Nope.
Excellent. In terms of, Casey, if you can come up for a second. In terms of other business, I think the most critical piece here is just through the remainder of the summer here, we've got a couple Sir Walter dates that come up with So can you spell that out a little bit in terms of,
Yeah, so you have your regularly scheduled third Thursday meeting on June 20th, if I have my dates correct. So really the items on that agenda are Sir Walter Raleigh Awards related. So reviewing the artist portfolios that have been submitted and selecting who y'all would like to work with, and just some, general planning conversations and decisions. So we can certainly hold the full commission meeting as we normally would. If y'all would prefer to just have the subcommittee meet, the Sir Walter Raleigh Award subcommittee meet, we can do that instead. So it's kind of up to you guys' discretion what your preference is about
sure,
that.
and so just to fill in, we have the call for artists out currently for the design certificate. So that is a element that does have to move forward at that mid-month meeting.
It does.
So we can't fully cancel the meeting in the middle of this month. And I believe there's some other Sir Walter potential touch points like catering, other things like that. So we do need to have a meeting. Can you run the commission, who's on the Sir Walter Commission?
I
Or
don't know if
the
I have it in front
subcommittee?
of me. I want to say it was like Matt, Jason, and Jonathan were the folks that I think I had noted down in a previous meeting. Obviously, I think it's totally fine, and other folks would be welcome to participate in the conversation, but wanted to give you guys the option since it's kind of a focused discussion.
And also to be clear, this isn't our only touch point on the certificate designer. We need to, so the subcommittee would need to select the designer.
Yes.
And then the designer would come back to the full commission with 3 proposals of design, and then we would provide feedback at that point, correct?
Right. So the plan is the commission will select who you want to work with on the meeting in 2 weeks. And then that would give the selected artists some time to come up with some concepts for you guys to consider, and that would happen at the July 10th meeting, where you could provide some feedback on those for the artist so that they could have the finalized design in early August.
And the subcommittee still has to be noticed, the same as a regular commission meeting. So I'm comfortable with just the committee meeting, but do you feel, as the one of the 3 represented here today, you feel comfortable making that decision as a group of 3 if we were to not hold the full commission meeting? You can say no.
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody, again, she's opened it up. If anybody does have concerns, that they could, certainly they're invited to come in. I don't have any problems with handling that business that day.
Okay. Any chance, Chris, you're available to attend that meeting just for
On the 20th?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm planning to.
Okay, great. That would be helpful just for continuity since we have some newer folks on that subcommittee.
When does the call for artists close?
It closes on Sunday, this Sunday, June 9th.
Have you gotten any submittals yet?
We've gotten one. So if y'all have no folks or.
And that went out in the Raleigh Arts Flash Beat, whatever it's called, right?
Yes, it is on the Raleigh Arts, there's a call for artists webpage on the city website. It is listed there too. And a couple Gov delivery email blasts have gone out, and it's been on social as well, so.
I'm comfortable canceling the regular meeting, but planning to hold a subcommittee meeting if you guys are comfortable with that. Are you guys comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Travi, we just had the jury for Sir Walter. How'd that go?
I went well. I was hoping Casey would get to that next.
Yeah, I can give you a little overview. So yeah, the meeting went really well. The jury had some great conversation and selected folks to win an award. Those selections will go to City Council in closed session at their upcoming meeting. I think it's June 18th for their confirmation of those. And after that, I will be in touch with all the folks that were nominated to let them know who the winner. We'll let them know whether or not they won an award, so that they can. And I should say everyone's invited, so it's not like only the winners are invited, but so that everybody's aware of it, they'll get to save the date at that same time as well.
How many nominations did we ultimately receive?
35-ish.
Amazing. That's
Yeah,
great.
Yeah.
somewhere around there. There's a couple projects that were nominated in a couple categories that increases it a little bit, but yeah.
Casey, can we tell how many awards got selected?
Was it 10?
11.
11?
Great. And I know you guys did a great job in picking awards.
Really,
good
really
teamwork,
good
yeah.
conversation. Yeah.
And then I believe the only other thing with some time sensitivity here is obviously we do need to get to sponsorships for Sir Walter. That's a super helpful thing that then ultimately goes to legacy funds as well in some capacity. The biggest ticket item there is that in previous years we've had a beverage sponsor, and that can be a pretty critical sponsorship because it kind of goes outside of our normal structure of gold, silver, bronze levels. So if you have anyone in mind, please make the ask
We
there.
have like an electronic flyer or something like that. For
There's
the
a web
sponsorships
page.
last-
Yeah, if you go to the Sir Walter Raleigh page on the city website, there's a link to the sponsorship information.
And does it
So there's a whole
include
sponsor
anything on the
page.
beverage sponsor?
I'm sorry?
Does it include anything about beverage sponsors, or is it just the 3 levels?
No, yeah, the 3 levels. I mean,
Context-
people can pick a different amount that they want, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not that they can only do
In
those
previous
options.
years, Marcus Tuttle was commissioner, and I think he's sponsored the beverages the last 2 or 3
Do we have any
years.
contractors on the commission anymore?
Yeah.
I don't think we do.
And I think effectively that's been somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 to 5,000 of expense for the event. So
He was at the
something significant to get covered potentially, and very helpful. So be thinking about that. If you're aware of anyone, I'm happy to make the ask if you point me in the right direction.
I'm going to
Yeah,
call
and-
Marcus again.
That is where I'm starting.
So the sponsorship information is on the webpage, so there's not, you're welcome to, start now with that. We'll need to know who the sponsors are by early August so that we can make sure we can include their logos and information in the print materials for the event. So just to plan ahead for that.
Okay. Anything further in terms of commission meeting, subcommittee meeting? Are you clear?
Could you, sorry, before we go off that, could you just send an email to all the commissioners so the ones that aren't here tonight get the notice that sponsorship information is on the website?
Yeah, I can do that.
Ask them to circulate it to all of their friends. Thank you.
Yeah, and just a reminder, so we're going to cancel the full meeting for the June 20th and just have the subcommittee meet. Obviously, other folks are welcome if they want to come.
And I'll please in your email, but I'll reinforce, encourage anyone from the full commission who's able to attend to do so. But semantically, it's just gonna be a committee meeting.
Yeah. And then the July 10th meeting is on a special date because of the holiday. That is a Wednesday, July 10th. And then I think the plan is to probably cancel the July 18th meeting since it would just be the week after. But I'm kind of leaving that open in case something comes up that y'all, business that y'all need to address, so.
Okay. And I see a calendar invite from you for the 10th, so.
Yes.
And you've already said you're not available, but anyone else who's not available, please let me know since that is an irregular date, just to be cognizant. And we have
And you do
2
have
cases
design
on
alternate
the,
cases,
yeah,
yeah.
on the agenda at this point. Okay, the only other update I have is when we did our annual report to council at their meeting this week? This week, wow. And they didn't have any, feedback. They accepted the report and recommendation of the commission, but we do have our quarterly check-in with our city council liaison later this month. So if there are specific items of recommendation that you feel are worthy of continuing to follow up on, we've laid the groundwork there and can certainly pursue that. So, for example, I mentioned in the report the concept of that early review entity, whether that's an alumni body of this group or some other means of being able to provide that early conceptual design feedback. And, there's general receptiveness at the council table to, exploring that in an advisory capacity. We'd need to, flesh that out. It's been something that's been tossed around as we've talked about name change, but I think that's something certainly Adam is interested in. I've talked to some former commissioners as well. So things to be figured out there, but I'm seeing head nodding that could be potentially a viable thing. And then, one of the recommendations was related to transparency and that specific uses, storage facilities are often tripping that up, and that there could be need for further study there. So I think today's case probably illustrated that a bit, of just the degree to which, meeting transparency by having a fake corridor has transparency to nowhere. And is that really the, intent there, and whether or not there should be a more specific.
Yeah, and the sheets, they said they're implementing all across sheets, so that's probably coming back with any sheets that's gonna get built, right?
Oh, you're talking about the glazing thing?
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's come up with the commission before,
Yeah.
previously. I don't know, is there any staff
It
working
is
on
on
that?
our list to get, with all the other things that go for text change, it is on our radar to incorporate that. I can't say that it's on a specific text change that's in the works right now, but it definitely is on the list.
Yeah, for me, definitely of the more trends related, the fact that we continue to see storage facilities come up, and this one was the furthest example of that to date, in terms of precedent there.
One of the things that kind of gets me on some of those is this is an evidentiary kind of thing, and we have people say, well, it makes you feel like it's more secure. It's like, is there any evidence that tells us that? Do I have what? I mean, there are plenty of banks with glass all on the outside of them when we put our money in them. So there was a lot of opinion being said as to why we could or should do something like that.
I mean, honestly, it's sad that projects like that can just live on corners that are as active as what we saw tonight. And it would be really nice to single out storage facilities, things like that, to not be able to be built in areas like that, because, I mean, we see the quality or lack of quality in the design time after time, and they get past the blank wall requirements by changing from one bad material to another bad material. And then we're stuck here talking about transparency. And at the end of the day, yeah, I'm actually glad they try and screen it with as much landscape as possible and just make the thing disappear. And that's a sad viewpoint to have for prime real estate like this. But I know these developers, they buy the property and they can build these storage facilities and make money off of them until, a higher and better use or a property buyer comes along. So it's like a temporary solution in it.
Yeah.
It makes me sad.
Yeah, and I don't want to keep you guys longer here tonight, but I'm hearing from, there's potential interest there in probing that further, whether that's, we talk about it as a full commission, or whether we do a subcommittee or something, just to feel out whether or not there's enough substance there to potentially go with an advisory recommendation to staff or whoever with a little bit more specificity there to this.
What's the process for text change? Do we recommend something in written
In this
language?
case,
Yeah.
I mean, there's multiple potential paths, but I would say it's likely you could do it as citizens, but probably through our council liaison or through staff to bring it to council as part of a report on behalf of the commission, and then have council be able to move that then through the process. So it would go to planning commission and on through. So does that align with your? That's how the name change text change worked.
Yeah, the name change, it would probably, or it could follow something similar where there's a formal recommendation from the commission to council for them to consider, and then they determine whether or not they want to authorize staff to actually draft a text change that would go to planning commission and then city council for ultimate approval or denial.
Okay, and then the final update is, if you guys recall, the text change with regards to streetscape plans and special signage with regards to the streetscape plans, that did pass at the public hearing earlier this week, Tuesday evening, I believe, with no amendments to it. So that would then mean that, the Design Review Commission is the review body for that new streetscape process. So I'm sure we'll hear more from staff as that, rolls out and through. That is a non-QJ function for us. That'll be a little bit interesting, but
You're not the final, is that, I can't remember.
Yeah, I think they make recommendations, and I think
And it goes to council.
approves it.
yeah, so we'll function like the planning
Like,
commission does with regards to that.
Yeah.
Would most of those meetings or hearings take place on our second meeting of the month since they're not QJ? Or would we try and stack?
I think we'll have to talk about that.
talk about it.
Yeah. And I don't want to speak out of turn, Catherine, tell me if I'm being incorrect, but I imagine we'll probably coordinate some kind of training and for y'all to make that adjustment to the new process.
I mean, it's not, almost like untraining.
You're going to deprogram us, yeah.
I don't know that you'll need it, but.
Right, obviously, we have this room on the first meeting of the month, and that's useful for more of a hearing, but I don't know how many of these are going to come through the pipeline, how frequently, so.
Yeah, it depends on more than just this room too. It's the staff resources and, you know, the notices and all that kind of stuff that have to be provided. So it will be,
Okay. Do you have any sense of when I know there was one that's kind of waiting in the eaves, but any idea of how soon that would come through?
I don't.
All right. We've gone on long enough. Thank you guys sincerely. We made it through at 6. 5 would have been our break point. So thank you all. And yeah, council certainly has been paying a lot more attention to all boards and commissions, particularly our board commission in terms of attendance. So that's got some renewed focus. It's something we talked about in our report. So expectation now is 75% attendance for meetings. So if for whatever reason you're not able to make that, expect a conversation with me at some point with regards to that. So thank you. Our meeting is adjourned.